Good evening and welcome to the April 8th meeting of the Wilmington School Committee. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we are here this evening, the first of two nights, interviewing finalists for the position of Interim Superintendent for the Wilmington Public Schools. As a reminder to the committee, we have three accomplished, qualified candidates thanks to the work of the screening committee. And so our job is to identify the candidate that we feel is the best fit for the Wilmington Public Schools at this point in time. I just want to very briefly thank everybody involved, the members of the screening committee, our friends at NASDAQ for helping to coordinate, Dr. Bryson and Andrea, our Director of Human Resources, for co-chairing that committee, and all the building leaders, teachers, staff, and community members who came out to meet the candidates earlier today. Our first candidate is Mr. Jared Fulgoni. Mr. Fulgoni currently is the Interim Superintendent of Regional School Unit number 63 in Holden, Maine. Previous titles held interim Special Education Director at the Lawrence Family Development Charter School, Superintendent of the Amesbury Public School, and Assistant Superintendent of the Haverhill Public Schools, among others.
Yeah.
Mr. Fulgoni, welcome. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, no, appreciate it.
So the committee has some questions that we'd like to ask.
Absolutely.
I have the distinct honor of asking the first question. So, Mr. Fulgoni, take a moment, if you could, to summarize your work experience and why you would like to be superintendent in Wilmington. You've had an opportunity to visit our community and talk with members of our school staff, so please, if you could, include any observations or anecdotes that were particularly memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, appreciate being here. I had a wonderful day spending it in the district and kind of getting to learn a little bit about it. So, the screening committee, I gave kind of the Reader's Digest version of my journey, but of course, you folks are here, we've got some time, so you guys get the Encyclopedia Britannica version of it. So, yeah, finished my 35 years in education, 27 years in leadership, and you had certainly mentioned some of those roles that I've played, and I think I've played pretty much every role in a district that there is, from assistant principal, assistant superintendent, interim superintendent, special ed director, and really have had a very successful and wonderful career doing that. And I think probably because regardless of the position that I actually was in at the time, I recognize that really my role as a leader was really to bring people together around a shared vision of excellence and then create a climate and a community in those schools where people really felt safe to take positive risks for students, really inspire people to come together, recognizing that a group of people are far more powerful when they're committed than when they're compliant. My districts have seen, tremendous growth. I've been, districts have recognized and been awarded for the gains and achievement. Been very fortunate that I've been part of overseeing 5 different school building projects. So I've had great experience with that as well. So what kind of brought me here? After 35 years, I've had an opportunity to do some interims. Very fortunate, had a wonderful opportunity to go up north to Maine to a wonderful little community. Was supposed to be there 3 months. They just asked me if I would be willing to do an interim for 3 months. So who could turn down being a interim superintendent near Acadia National Park, near Bar Harbor, for 3 months in the summer? And they just needed someone that just said, we just need someone to help tie us over while we do the search. So of course I went up, rented a little cottage on the water. It was absolutely beautiful, it was great. And the board chair came to me in the fall and said, would you be willing to stay, for the year? That was 3 years ago, folks. And then of course my board, they came to me and they said, now just so you understand, we just voted and we're extending you 2 more years. So I said, folks, I love you, this is great. I said, but it's really far from home. I mean, I live in Kittery, so it's, I go up there during the week, come home on the weekends. So having been involved in a number of school building projects and having experience, working very closely with the MSBA and working very closely with both, the CMs, OPMs. In fact, I got a call on Friday from an OPM about some question about the Needham Public Schools and looking for some help and information there. So just through that, there was someone that reached out to me and said, I know that the Wilmington School District is looking for an interim superintendent, specifically someone with building project experience. What's really nice about not only my role now as an interim superintendent, but I think really through the course of my careers, I really recognize that the model of leadership that I bring is really, I think what's termed now as a service model of leadership, recognizing that pyramid, thinking, okay, the superintendent at the top of the pyramid really is inverted. At least it always has been for me in my roles, recognizing that really kind of the higher up it's really the more people that you serve, the more people that you support, the more people that you lead and inspire. And so throughout my course in coming here and having conversations, I ask the question of every group. I think I've asked it of many of you. I've asked it of the administrators. I asked it of the central office. And that question was just simply, what is it that you need? So, my skill set, my experience allows me to come into a district as an interim and say exactly that. Tell me what it is you need. And then and then I can use my skills to actually help not only just, move the district forward, but actually help in a number of the initiatives that you have. So, I've had wonderful conversations, heard a lot from folks when I asked that question, what is it that you need? And there was a variety of answers in that, which was nice to hear. There were some common threads and themes throughout that. Certainly the building project is one I heard very common. Could you please help us with that? Recognizing that you have a vote coming up, so how do we tackle that? How do we address maybe some of those folks that are either on the fence about the project or firmly in the no category, and how do we reach out to them, bring the community together to move us forward in that? That was a common theme of things I heard. But I also heard some individual responses to that question from some of the folks in the district, and some of the folks were looking for some mentoring. Recognize that they're fairly new in their positions, and we're looking for someone that could come and kind of mentor them and provide them some support and help. I also ran into some folks that I had worked with in other districts, and that was really nice for me as well to see those folks and reconnect with some of them. So, had a really nice day. I think it's a good match. I think the skills that I bring, not only just with obviously doing 5 school building projects and my experience with the MSBA, but also just my experience as a leader and recognizing that kind of service model of leadership and bringing the community together, creating a really supportive culture, which I know you have in a lot of places. In fact, one of the principals talked about her school in particular and how she really has turned that school around by creating a really positive, supportive culture within that school. And as a model and as a leader, that's the model of leadership that I bring. So, in looking at the totality of the picture, I think it's a really nice match. So, again, I'm in a very fortunate place in my career where I get to choose how I spend that time. And it isn't that I don't love my district. There's some great work we're doing up there. It's a great group of people. It's just that they recognize as well. There's what they're like. We appreciate every minute you've given us. We'll appreciate every minute you continue to give us. But we also recognize it's a long ways for you. So it's just, we're getting to the point where it's just a little more difficult for me to be that far away from home. So, but yeah, I look forward to any questions that you have. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have the next one. Actually, did we introduce ourselves? Do we want to do that before we go further in the questions?
Certainly. You can. Why don't we introduce ourselves as we ask the question?
Very good. Stephen Turner, member of the school committee the last 3 years. Thank you. Sorry. So, as an interim candidate, how do you view the role of interim superintendent in stewarding activities that are already underway, like the strategic plan, curriculum improvement, hiring and evaluation of staff?
Yeah, great. Similar question was kind of asked of me by one of the administrators, and we talked a lot about what the things that are going on, and then how I could certainly support those things that are, but also. As an interim, being able to ask the questions, and again, I talked just moments ago about asking a question, what do you need? But in doing that, you kind of start to identify what are those pieces of the district that maybe need more support than others? What are those really strong things that we want to continue? What are those things that maybe we say, okay, how can we improve in doing that? What I tell people, listen, it isn't the Gerald Fulgoni School District. If they start naming things after you, typically it's not a good sign that your health is really right. They want to start naming things. What I recognize and always have is that it's the Wilmington School District. My job as the superintendent is to make it the best district that it possibly can. And the only way I can do that is by really listening and understanding what are the needs of the district so that I can tailor the support I give to ensure that those things move forward. So it's really it's an ongoing, it's a transactional kind of relationship, right, where I'm really listening to see what it is that you guys do, and then what is it, the support that I provide for those. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I have a quick follow-up question?
Certainly.
Just kind of along that line, like, you know, as an interim superintendent in particular, how do you think you find the line between not trying to make kind of, you know, rapid change in a place where we've been, you know, doing things a certain way, but also making sure that the district doesn't stand still, that
Sure.
we've been doing a lot of important
Sure.
work and we need to make
Yeah.
sure that that continues
Yeah.
to progress
Yeah.
without kind of suddenly bringing in like a whole bunch of new initiatives and so forth.
absolutely. So, you know, there's always this conversation about schools, and people always say, oh my God, schools are, you know, they're so difficult at change. They're horrible at change. Change is so difficult. Teachers are terrible at change. Districts are terrible at change. The reality is, we're not terrible at change. The problem is, we're too good at change. What we're not good at is improvement. Now, exactly to your point, a lot of times superintendents will come in and say, okay, we're gonna change this, and the baby goes out with the bathwater. And and I say, I can criticize superintendents because I am one. You know, oftentimes the superintendent will say, oh, and we're gonna do it this way. And the problem with doing that is that when you just do that change, you disenfranchise people. People disconnect because they say, oh, this too shall pass, here we go again. Schools are really good at change. We need to get lousy at change, because change is just doing it differently. What we need to get good at is improvement, which means taking stock of what we're doing, using a lot of data points, a lot of different points, and then looking at that and saying, how can we do that better? And that's where you kind of slow down that process of coming in and saying, oh, okay, we're gonna upset the apple cart in terms of rents, because that's not really the goal. The superintendents, if they're coming in doing that, that isn't healthy for the district. Right? There are some things that maybe need to be improved upon, but I'm not going to say that there are things that need to be changed. And those are two very different processes. One of them involves really listening, taking stock of what we're doing, and then again, engaging people in that process to identify and improve. The change process pushes people to the side, discounts their input on things, and disenfranchises people. That's when you see people disengage. But if we're really talking about true improvement, that's what I'd like to be part of.
Thanks. Thank you.
Dr. McCauley?
Thank you. So, Michael Mercaldi, school committee member. So, as the new superintendent, how would you go about building relationships of trust and collaboration with faculty and staff?
Yeah.
Secondly, how would you go about building trust with parents and the community at large?
Yeah.
Please give some examples of the types of media you might use and the tone, style, or manner you try to express.
Okay. That's good. We talked about that a little bit at the screening committee as well. And I'm going to kind of start almost at the other end of that question, which is, yes, there's a tons of different media. When I was doing the building projects, I was putting out a video every week where I would stand there and talk to the public about exactly what was going on, even from the design elements. When we got into excavation, I'd be there with a hard hat and top of, and maybe in the seat of the payload. We kind of had fun with it as well. But it wasn't so much about the medium that we're using, or how often. It was about the credibility of the message. So I found that, and when there was trust and credibility created first. So I can give you a couple examples, and I'll apologize for the people that have heard my stories. But I'll share them with you. And I shared that story about being in a district that was struggling to get their building project passed, and coming out and voting no, and voting no, and voting no. And so superintendent gave me a call and said, I really need help getting this building project that keeps getting voted down no. So through conversations with them, it was, okay, well, who are the groups of these people that are saying no, and tell me what you've done. So that he talked a lot about, well, we've invited people to come in, and we've put up flyers, and we've had open houses, and we've had all these things, and people coming out to those, recognizing go out to them. So I started going every Saturday Those people that are voting no, they're not coming to the open houses, but where do they all go? And they all go to the dump. Now, this was in rural New Hampshire. We don't call it the dump anymore. We call it the transfer station or the recycling center or what, whatever we're calling it. But everyone went there. On the building, you still had to get rid of your trash, right? So I started showing up there every Saturday in the summer. People thought, that guy's a nut. Who's the nut in the suit at the dump helping with my garbage? But I would just do that, and I'd help them throw away the garbage, and I'd introduce myself, and I'd get talking to people Saturday after doing that. And eventually the conversation would become, say, hey, listen, I just want you to just, come over to the school and let me show you around. Let me show you why I think we need a school. And I would start to invite these people in. And lo and behold, we got the vote. We got the vote through and got the building. It wasn't because we were sitting on the fires. It was because I built that relationship and that rapport with people, so that the message was being received, and it had credibility. They knew that there was someone that respected them. They knew that was someone that cared about the community. They knew that it was legit, right? Same thing goes with my faculty and staff. And I know certainly you probably heard that with reference calls that you made, and I was very, very, very proud of that relationship that I've built with my faculty and staff. And I'll give you some examples of that. My teachers, when I was a principal in the schools, my teachers didn't have duties. And I said, listen, your time is valuable, you're professionals, I'll do the duties. I can stand there and do lunch duty and recess duty and bus duty, and so my assistant principal and I will do these. If the trade is, you'll use that time for professional learning communities. So of course, teachers are saying, well, let me say, get together and meet with my colleagues or stand out in the rain and bus, that wasn't a tough one. And out of that work, out of giving teachers that time and actually walking the walk and saying, I'll do your duty so you guys can meet, the teachers came up with this amazing thing, we called it Fun Fact Friday, where they gave every student in the school the same math skills test. And then we would regroup the students based on that skill. So we would have some 7th graders that were struggling with concept, but 6th graders that were ahead, and we would regroup them based on that skills. Now, that was entirely born out of that support of teachers. There was I didn't get any pushback, right? Now, there were some folks in other schools that were like, well, wait a minute, that's an additional duty for the teachers. Now they're having to teach it. And the teacher said, oh, no, that came from us. So again, by building that rapport and that respect, and again, that kind of culture where teachers feel supported, the messaging that you then use has a much greater value. So whether it's, email, whether it's Facebook, whether it's the social media, whether it's putting out, the message was being received because they knew it was coming from a place of support, a place of respect, and it was a lot more valid.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Ragsdale, you're next.
So as has already been mentioned, and I'm David Ragsdale.
Yes.
As has already been mentioned, that our district is involved in an important MSBA project.
Yes.
Can you share more details? You've mentioned that you've been involved in 5 building projects.
Yes.
Can you share some more details about your experience leading these types of major capital projects?
Absolutely.
Particularly in terms of gaining community support and ensuring alignment with the project's goals.
Yep, absolutely. So I kind of give reference one, but I've done 5 building projects, 3 brand new constructions and 2 addition renovations. So one of the schools that I did was the Hunking School in Haverhill. That was actually used as a model school by the MSBA for project management, because we brought that school in ahead of schedule and under budget, which really made the taxpayers really happy when we were actually able to give money back at the end of the project and get that. But that also was, and in each one of these projects, and you guys have some similar things, in each one of those projects, there's always, how do you get it through? Because there's no one community that says, yep, great, we're all ahead, everyone wants to pay. There's always going to be some pushback. School projects are expensive. So we spent a lot of time doing some of the things you know about going out, finding those people, having conversations, going to the Rotary clubs, going to the senior centers, going out and finding those people that maybe weren't in support of this, and having open and honest conversations with them, and getting those folks about. Sure enough, we got our projects through. I really enjoy the school building process and have been involved in it, so really very hands-on, and I think that's why the MSBA really used us as a model. The Hunking School was also featured in the New York Times as an exemplar for school safety because of the way we did it, so I'm very proud of that as well. But and this is a little bit different take, but I just want to just kind of explain a little bit, that we also recognize that the school building itself wasn't just a place where education was happening, but we actually designed it to be an educational tool. So we said, we want the school not to just be the place where education happens, where learning happens, but how do we build the school so it actually is a learning tool? And we put a number of features in that made that school building an actual learning tool. The building itself was really interactive. The students were able to track its energy use. We had a green roof, so the students were able to, we used that as a teaching tool. We actually had Bluetooth-enabled devices all throughout the school, so as you move through the school, content would come up on your device. That content was created by the students. So let's say in this example, if you walked past, there'd be a Bluetooth-enabled device on those art displays out there. And when you got near one, content would come up on your phone, which would explain the art that you're seeing, and it would explain it all. And that was all student content and all student created. So the building itself really became an instructional tool. So that was kind of how we envisioned it, and then how we managed that project to make that a reality. So yeah, been involved right from the design and the thing all the way to having, Terry Kwan come out and do the walkthrough and do all the checks and walking through the punch list and, working with the CM. I've done CM projects like you guys have. I've also done design bid build, so I've experience with all of them, so. Is there more, did I get that, or was there other?
No, that was-
okay, all right, didn't want to leave anything hanging on that.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? You mentioned 5 building projects. How many of those were MSBA versus how many weren't? Or were they all?
Yeah, 2 of them were MSBA.
2 were?
Yeah, 2 were MSBA, yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, thank you. My follow-up, Mr. Fulgoni,
Yes, sir.
is, could you maybe add a little bit more color just on the process of getting the Hunking to kind of transition to, in your role or what work you did?
Yeah.
One of the things we are facing is having a school being built while the current school is operating, so that relationship management and transitioning from one building to another and then getting them into the new school. Can you add any color in your experience with that?
Exact same thing. So what we did is very similar to you do. The Hunking, when you pulled in originally, you pulled into the driveway, it was all the athletic fields. So we had acres and acres of athletic fields. And then the school was at the back end. And what we did is almost the same thing you guys thinking. Built a new school, transitioned the students into it, and then bulldozed that and then put the athletic fields in there. So it was a very similar process to what you guys are looking at. Some of the factors that I talked about, folks, is how can you control costs by ensuring that you have the space on this one. So when you're doing excavation, you can maintain all those materials on site. Because if the excavation, which is a tremendous amount of earth that needs to get moved, if that has to get trucked off site, it increases the cost significantly. But if we can look at that and say, okay, can we manage as much of that material, all the loam, you want to recoup all that loam, not letting it go to waste. But if you can store it on site, you're saving money already because then you're not have to trucking it back and forth. So we did the same thing. What we did is we built the school, which was great because the kids got to watch it. We actually involved the architects would come into the schools, the CM would come into the schools, they would talk about the process, they talked about the math that's involved, they talked about the safety, they talked about the environmental concerns. So again, the building project actually became a learning tool. Then once the building was built, we moved everybody in, demoed that part of the building, and then put all the athletic fields where that was. So almost very similar to the process that you folks are looking at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one more follow-up on this.
One more.
Did any of the projects you worked on involve consolidation, like we're doing in our project?
Yes and no. In Haverhill, we were consolidating, closing. There were 18 different school buildings, and we had some of those old buildings left from the 1800s that we did close some of those, move a couple grades out of one of the elementary schools, closed one of the little brick buildings and moved folks into that, which involved moving some people around the city. And that was honestly part of how it sounds like, ooh, yikes, that would be kind of a tough thing. The reality is we communicated that really well, and it actually became a positive because a lot of the people that thought they wouldn't get the benefit from the school because it was on the other side of the city actually saw that, oh, wait a minute, my students are actually going to have an opportunity to attend the new school as well. In Amesbury, what we did there is we weren't consolidating schools. We were actually going from one. We had 2 schools, one on either side of town. We were closing one of those schools. The property that the town owned was actually literally adjacent to the other school. So the issue there became, well, wait a minute, we had schools, that were on this. Now the schools are on both sides of town. So I used to have a 2-minute drive to school. Now I got to drive all the way to the other side. So similar conversations had to take place about, yep, we understand that. Yes, you might have a little bit longer drive in the morning, but this is the value of it. So it's striking that balance and helping people understand. Right now, I'm going through a consolidation. I'm in RSU 63. I have, in the middle school, there are 7 empty classrooms. The enrollment is declining significantly. Not uncommon. You folks don't have that problem. That's amazing. But in most of the Commonwealth and across most of the country, we're seeing a significant decrease in enrollment of school-age children. The district I'm in right now is actually going through the consolidation process. I have 7 empty classrooms in one of the schools, and I have 2 elementary schools. Some of the grades, there's 30 kids and 3 kindergarten teachers. That's 10 in a class. Some of the classes will have 6, 7 students in a class. It's difficult, and I've had these conversations with the town manager, and to say, in front of the taxpayers, I need 3 schools. The truth of the matter is, I don't. We really need to look at closing one of the elementary schools. So that conversation be kind of kicked down the road for a number of years. Again, what's nice coming in as an interim is you're able to kind of make some tough decisions because you don't have that same kind of angst. You're able to come in and say, yep, this is a tough decision, but I'm okay making it because, this is why I'm here. And so move the school committee forward on actually going through the consolidation process. So it doesn't involve a building project, but right now I'm in the throes of consolidating from 2 elementary schools down to 1 and then shifting some programs around to be able to say, yep, we went from 3 buildings down to 2. The taxpayers and the town managers are quite ecstatic about that. So, but that's, there's some difficult conversations around that. Again, 1 school in one town, 1 school on the other side of town, and folks all agree. Everyone agrees unanimously that we need to close schools. Like, yes, we definitely need to close a school, but not my school, right? And so that's the conversation that's taking place right now, is how do I move people from that emotional decision-making standpoint to a really kind of rational, logical one, and say, yep, I recognize that that's an emotional decision for you, consolidating the school. That's the school you went to. It's where your kids went to. It's where your grandchildren went to. That's where, your name is carved in the bathroom wall still. But getting people to say, yes, here's the emotional part of it, but here's the logical, rational part of it. And that's what I'm trying to help folks do, is understand exactly what are the rational decision-making and guide them through that process. So, yep, have experience with consolidation as well, too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Bryson?
Sure. Ken Bryson. What has been your role in the academic success of students? Please also describe how you have supported and strengthened special education in your district by providing specific examples.
Yeah, I can. We'll give you a couple I'll give you a couple examples on the academic achievement. Done a lot of turnaround work in schools. When I was arrived as the principal of Triton, that was a school designated as a school in need of improvement. Within 2 years, we were one of only 8 schools in the Commonwealth to exit our accountability status. When I got to Haverhill, that was, district certainly, that was struggling. It was a level 4 district. Within a number of years, we were recognized as having the most level 1 schools of any of the urban districts. But let me give you a specific example that I think kind of captures some of what we've been talking about. So I was a principal of a middle school. Same thing, it was a school that was designated as a school in need of improvement. And it was a really underperforming school. Very competent, capable teachers, competent staff, very capable students. But what they just lacked was kind of a clear, decisive leadership to kind of pull everyone together and make that happen. So within a couple years, that school was actually winning awards. for being a high-performing gap-closing school district. The chancellor of the New York City Public Schools, Joel Klein, reached out and said, I'd like to invite you down to Brooklyn to share how, you turned this school around. So, that's pretty intimidating to go down to Brooklyn and speak in front of, thousands of principals and explain to them what it is that, I did to turn it. So I started thinking about this. Okay, I'm going to go down there, and how do I explain this? So I'm making a list of all the things that we did, how we basically said, okay, every class, no matter what the content is going to be a literacy class. We're going to inculcate literacy skills in every single class. We're going to use data. So I've a data coach trainer who did a lot of work with Nancy Love. So I was training my teachers on how to be data coaches, and so we had set up great data teams. We had done a lot of work around vocabulary development, and we did a lot of work aligning our curriculum. And we just did, I just had this wonderful list of all these amazing work and things that we had done. And as I was driving down there, it occurred to me that probably wasn't going to list off anything that those other principals weren't doing. And what I realized is it wasn't the what we were doing, it was the culture and climate in which we were doing it. And again, going back to that supportive role, that service model of leadership, recognizing that a group of committed people will always outperform a group of people that are compliant. So what I ended up sharing with principals is, yes, here are the things you do, but here's how you support teachers. Here's how you make teachers feel safe to take risks. Here's how you get teachers to be experts at their craft. Here's how you give teachers choice and voice in their professional development as opposed to the one-size-fits-all. Here's how you bring people together around a shared vision of excellence. Good principals, good leaders, good superintendents set high standards, but the really great ones help people achieve them and help people believe in them. And so that really is what I ended up sharing about here's how we're going to do it. So yeah, I've championed the writing of the standards, benchmarks, and performance for the state of New Hampshire. Actually worked with Mitchell Chester, believe it or not, on designing the accountability system that's used here in Massachusetts, others. Went out with the U.S. Secretary of Education years ago after NCLB came out, was going out to Denver. There was a small group of us from across the United States that came together to develop the model accountability systems. Mitchell Chester at that point, who was the Massachusetts commissioner, he was actually in Ohio at the time. He was an associate commissioner in Ohio, and we were out in Denver. So always had that experience about really accelerating learning in schools, but certainly tying that culture is what really made it happen. So now you ask about special education. Certainly you can see from my resume and my experience, I've been a special ed director. I started my career out working at a school for the deaf years ago. So always had a natural kind of instinct to be the voice of people that literally didn't have one, so that advocacy. And I've been a special ed director in a number of districts. In fact, Jen just did one, to help out in Lawrence. So certainly understand the written prior notice and all the pieces of the special ed puzzle, but let me share, and again, I apologize for the people that are now hearing my stories 2 or 3 times, but let me just share so you understand the philosophy in which I come to this with special education. So when I got up to 63, one of the first people I met was a parent. I had gone to, they were doing a strategic planning meeting. A lot of people there, community members, teachers, parents, a bunch of people. And so I walk in the room, they invited me up, and the first person that beelines across the room is a parent of a student with significant special education needs. And she had just had a really bad experience, had lost trust in the district, felt her child wasn't getting the service they needed, felt that the school wasn't doing their part in providing an education. It was really angry and really upset and really disenfranchised. So of course she beelines right over to talk to the new superintendent. And she comes up and introduces herself, and she says, "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm Caleb's mom." And she says, and my son, has significant, he's nonverbal. He has significant cognitive delays. He has a seizure disorder, and she's just telling me all these significant just needs that this student has. And I listened, but then I stopped her, and I said, "Okay, let me ask you a question." I said, "Tell me what Caleb is a genius at. Tell me what Caleb can do better than anyone else in the world. And she started crying. And she said, Mr. Fulgoni, no one's ever asked me that before. The paradigm of special education, not just here, but everywhere, is it's a deficit-based model, right? And in that deficit-based model, we have just said, okay, here are all the deficits that you have. And now we're going to work in remediating those. Now, I've told you folks, my handwriting is absolutely deplorable, horrible, basically illegible. But how much time do I spend working on my handwriting? Now, I'm sure I could go over to one of the elementary schools and get those books and practice, right? But how much time do I spend working on that? 0. And if you walked into my office, if left to my own devices, and thankfully I'm not very often, you would see that my office is, papers and so on. But how much time do I spend, practicing organizational, skills? None. Because the reality is the successful people, and all of you, right, who are successful people, do not spend time remediating your weaknesses, but instead spend time capitalizing on your strengths. But the paradigm of special education for years has always been a deficit-based model. So when I asked that mom that question, then she started telling me, she says, well, he's great with our animals. He's got this great sense of humor. He loves the color. He loves art. I said, great. Now let's build a program around that. Let's build an IEP around supporting his gifts. So let me give you another example. Walked into a classroom. It was a social studies class. And they were talking about the colonization of the United States and the role of Native Americans in it. So they're going through, they got the textbook out, they're talking about it, they're going through the chapter, teachers leading this discussion, about the role of Native Americans and the colonization of the United States, and going through it. And what the teacher failed to realize is that sitting right in front of him was a student who was Native American. And so I had a conversation with the teacher and said, I think there might be an opportunity that's being missed here. So conversation with the teacher. Next thing you know, the student comes in full regalia, right? Brings artifacts from his nation, leads this amazing drumming lesson, and has this amazing conversation in front of his classmates about the role of Native American, what's it like to be the things that he does about talking about his nation, talking about his ancestors. In that situation, folks, who would we say is the gifted and talented student? We would certainly all agree that that student was the gifted and talented one. Clearly knew more than the teacher ever would about the role of being Native American, what it was like, the struggles that they had, the role that they played. But when it came time for that student to write the report on it, he had to go to the resource room because he was a student with written expression needs. But you see, the paradigm of just treating the deficit means that we don't look at the strengths. So there's a workshop that I do, and I've done it at a number of CPACs, about how do you change that paradigm. And so those are some of the conversations I've had with some folks even here about what would that look like, changing the paradigm to really be a strength-based model as opposed to a deficit-based model. And the outcomes of that is I have parents now that are far more engaged, students that are feeling more successful, that we're actually celebrating more student success and working with students on those gifts and talents they have and building upon them, because we all do that. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, but no one labels us and pitches us by our deficits. We all use our strengths every day, right? You have strengths in the IT and data department, right? We all have these amazing strengths, and that's what makes you folks successful, because you capitalize and utilize those. You don't spend any time on working on how to become, make your handwriting better or make yourself, you use your strengths. And so that's the paradigm and the philosophy that I come at special education with. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Sorry if these are long-winded. Feel free to, throw something at me or something if you guys, if it's going on, but, yeah.
Mr. Golden. Thank you. Nicholas Golden. I'm the newest member of the school committee, and I wanted to thank you. I also have questionable handwriting, so I appreciate the solidarity.
Yes.
One of the strategic objectives in Wilmington's strategic plan is to create equitable and inclusive schools. Yeah. What do you do to ensure all students are welcome in our district, and how do you ensure responsiveness to parent concerns that their children may not be made to feel welcome?
Yeah, okay. So you see and I just bring this up because it's in my paperwork. So the work that I've done to create inclusive schools was actually, I won the New England ADL Award for creating inclusive school environments. And that went to not only just inclusive in terms of special education, but inclusive of inclusion of folks of any of the marginalized kind of populations. So let me speak a little bit about that. And here's a, and again, I tell stories to explain things, so I'll tell you stories. So, there's kind of a little quiz that I've, been giving my teachers for years. And I explain to them, for those that don't know, in Maine they certainly don't understand, but certainly you folks understand the geography a little bit better. So I explained to them the demographics of the city of Lawrence. The city of Lawrence is has one of the highest concentration of Hispanics in the Commonwealth. Spanish really is the predominant language of the city of Lawrence. And so I asked the teachers a very simple question. I said, okay, knowing that Lawrence is a predominantly Hispanic community, predominantly Spanish-speaking, which holiday do you think is celebrated more? Which holiday do you think is more celebrated? St. Patrick's Day or Cinco de Mayo? And the answer is really simple, and it's what?
Cinco de Mayo.
And that's the answer I get, okay? The answer is St. Patrick's Day. Why? Because Cinco de Mayo is a Mexican holiday, and the city of Lawrence is predominantly Dominican. They don't celebrate Mexican holidays, right? St. Patrick's Day, everyone's Irish on St. Patrick's Day, right? It's a cultural kind of, certainly Dominican Independence Day is a huge holiday in the city of Lawrence. But certainly Cinco de Mayo isn't, because it actually is insulting if you would say, assume that they are because they're Mexican. And so I approached that question about diversity by first understanding and listening. Because before you can kind of have that conversation with groups, and I used to meet regularly with the Hispanic Coalition in Haverhill, you have to understand first, because again, we come at things that seem like they would be pretty simple. And had I just jumped in and assumed, yep, let's sing them out, you have to first start from that standpoint of understanding. And it involves listening and asking questions. And again, some of those similar kind of themes about building that rapport and the respect. So whether it's our LGBTQ community, whether it's our Hispanic community, whether it's our Asian, whether it's any of those minorities, the best thing I can do is ask that same question I've been asking all of you is, what is it that you need? Tell me what you need. And by asking that question first and that understanding, then I can start supporting. But if I assume I'm going to come in and support and yay, we're going to have a great big Cinco de Mayo in all the schools in Lawrence, I would have done some real damage, because it would have been incredibly offensive to those folks to say, yeah, we're not Mexican. So that you see the similar threads there, right, about that really building that rapport, listening for understanding and asking the questions, what is it that you need so that I can provide that support and resource? And for that work, because that's why I won that New England ADL Award, just for, so I was very proud of that, because that was, yeah, I mean, I wasn't certainly looking for it, but it was just, to receive that award was pretty amazing, so, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Samaha.
Jay Samaha, excuse me. The Wilmington Middle School has recently undergone a program review in partnership with the Association for Middle Level Education, AMLE.
Yep.
We've also recently hired a permanent principal and are looking forward to seeing continued improvement and success. What has been your experience in helping to guide and shape school culture and school improvement, especially at the middle school level?
So I was a middle school principal for many, many years. And again, middle school principal at Triton, we were actually recognized and awarded for the gains and achievement there. At Bath, same thing, that was the one where I was invited to turn that school around. And I think you've heard those conversations about really ensuring that there's a healthy culture there. And it goes to kind of, again, putting your money where your mouth is, right? That recognizing that teachers are experts, they're professionals. The best I can do is, again, support them. So that example is a great one for this one, about going to the teachers and saying, listen, you're professionals. Your time is far more valuable working collaboratively and together in a PLC than it is standing outside. I can do that. You know, I can stand outside with an umbrella and do bus duty. I can do lunch duty. I can do recess duty. And by giving the teachers and saying, wow, wait a minute, this guy's taking our duties and valuing us as professionals and giving us this time. And what came out of it was exactly that, right? Was this really kind of organic teachers coming together and coming up with some really amazing creative ways to improve achievement. My question to them was, as you guys now know, great, what do you need to make that happen? Tell me what you need. And they're like, we just need some flexibility in the schedule so that we can give this test, we can do some regrouping. And so my role was, great, what is it that you need? And by doing that, we saw significant gains in achievement. Same thing at the other middle schools. And again, having been a middle school principal and done that exact work. So yeah, I've had some initial conversations with your middle school principal about that exact thing. And you know, that was the one of the ones when I asked him, what is it that you need? And that was one of the kind of conversations we had about, yeah, here's where we are, and I'd love to have some, you know, further conversations about how you can kind of help us, you know, with this middle school turnaround. So, yeah, so just, you know, done it. I can certainly talk more about it, about, you know, how we coached, again, as a data coach, setting up data teams and coaching teachers on how to really use data. And giving them a process to do so, how we focused on literacy in every class so that every class was a literacy class, how we spent a lot of time doing the curriculum map, how, you know, and mapping that out so teachers understanding. And we also, and I won't give it all away because it's an activity that I do with teachers, but also keeping the main thing, and getting a lot of the nonsense out of the way. And as a teacher, I think, you know, you certainly would appreciate getting some of the, we won't go into specifics as to what the on any given day for you, you know there's a lot of nonsense. And if I can get that out of your way so that you can focus on your job of instruction, it makes you a more effective teacher, it makes you a more inspired teacher, it makes you feel a supported teacher. And then what you end up with is a culture where we're all in the same boat pulling on the oars together. And so there's a natural accountability that happens from that as well, when we're all like, hey, we're all in this together, we're all pulling on the oars. And if someone isn't, it isn't then just the administrator saying, well, you need to, it becomes a collaborative, hey, we all need to be pulling on the oars together. So certainly that's absolutely something I could help with here in the district as well, so.
Follow up?
Yep. Just a quick follow-up on that. So, you know, you say how you kind of allow the teachers in kind of like a bottoms-up approach to kind of give feedback to the administrative staff. What did you do to manage if, let's say, their ideas were conflicting with each other and maybe not aligned with your ideas as the administrator?
Yeah. Because I don't want you to think that there's plenty of days, folks, when I'm burned in effigy in the teacher's room. I don't want you to think, you know, that everyone loves me all the time. I don't want to just, you know, I don't want to BS you. Because the truth is, I don't make decisions that people will like. I can't do that. I can't make decisions that everyone will like. It's not my goal. My goal is to make decisions that everyone can respect. And when you make decisions that people can respect, they may not like it. They might disagree with it. But if they understand the process for how the decision was made, they got to have input on it. They may not like the decision if you say, okay, every day we're going to serve apples. We love apples, and we're going to serve apples, and we all want apples. And I say, okay, let's talk about that, and here's why we're not going to do apples, but we're going to have oranges, and blah, blah. You may not like that I said, oh, okay, he's going to do oranges. But you'll respect that decision because you got to be part of it. You understood how the decision-making process was made. And that same thing applies when you have teachers that are in conflict. If I have to step in, they may not like the decision. But what I get is, yeah, I can respect that decision. And that takes a lot of that conflict away. The same thing's going to happen, folks, with this building project. You are not going to be able to have a building project where everyone is going to say, this is awesome. Like, what it's going to involve is some compromise. People are going to want to be transparent about the building process, about the cost of it, about the benefits. They're also going to, honestly, you're going to want to be transparent about the downfall. The downfall may be, hey, and I don't know if this is the case, I'm just using an example, that, hey, you know, we might end up with less athletic space. But let's be honest and upfront about that. People might not like that, but if you're honest and upfront, they'll respect that. And that's how you kind of deal with those conflicts. Again, it goes to that same kind of theme that you're hearing about. I can't make decisions, folks, that people like. I can't. I make decisions that people can respect, and those are two different things.
Thank you. Mr. Axel.
Wilmington is currently negotiating with several of our
Yeah.
bargaining units, and we expect that these negotiations are going to continue into the next school year. So can you describe your experiences with just dealing with the local teacher union in general and developing
Yes.
good relationships with the union between contracts for
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
periods?
Yeah.
And then also your role and experience in collective bargaining?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience in collective bargaining. In fact, in Haverhill, I had 9 different bargaining units. Have been involved significantly in collective bargaining, having done collective bargaining with all those units multiple times, negotiated the teachers' collective bargaining units, and am currently involved in the negotiation of the teachers' bargaining unit right now in 63. I've had a really very good relationship with the teachers union, and I think you may have heard that, because I think one of the folks I offered up for you folks to speak to was the president of the HTA, of the Haverhill Teachers Union. I know that they had gone on strike, and there was, they really were at odds. And was a tremendous compliment to me was the leadership said to me, Jared, if you were still here, we wouldn't have gone on strike, because we know we could have worked this out with you. But it goes back to that same kind of thing. The reason I had such a good relationship and have a good relationship with unions is because we have that mutual respect. We have that rapport built. That's a perfect example of, do they like every decision I make? No. Do they respect it? Yes. So I have significant experience with the collective bargaining, have successfully bargained those and have closed all those out and had all those contracts ratified. And that goes everything from the secretarial unit to, to bus drivers and ed techs, to the teachers unit, to negotiating the administratives contracts. I mean, the administrators can't collectively bargain, but they bargain collectively, and so I've had to do that a number of times as well. But my relationship with the Teachers Association has always been a very, very positive one, because of those same kinds of threads and themes that you're hearing about, is asking the questions, providing support, and making decisions that people respect. And so when you have that, because again, there's going to be times we're going to sit on opposite sides of the table with my union presidents. And we didn't always agree, but we walked away from the table respecting one another and respecting the decisions that we made, because we both came to the table that way. So, I would only continue that same, that same process here. So, so certainly have experience. Yes, sir.
Mr. Gold.
Thank you. Could you add a little color on just the experience with grievances and solving those, and what that looks like in terms of, we're talking a little bit about your conflict resolution capacity.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in grievances within the context of building and maintaining specific personal relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I can give you an example, but I might have to change
Sure, of
the
course.
scenario a little bit, just so it's not too specific. But if, had a few grievances come through, interesting. So I'll give you a couple, but one that's we already talked about. When I talked about the teachers doing that extra work of the hunking and doing that fun fact writing those, the union leadership, who was not within our building, actually came and said, hey, this is additional workload, this is not part of the teachers, and it was actually, so of course I said, well, understand this was not an administrative edict. My role was just supporting this, and this is really, this came out of a kind of a grassroots, if you will. And so it was, that was actually, dismissed. Now, I've had, course, grievances is just, it's a questioning of the rules. You're grieving the contract. You're not grieving the person. And I try to remind my administrators of that, the principals, that when a grievance comes and their first reaction is to kind of get upset and feel, I said, folks, this is not about people. They're grieving the contract. What they're asking for is clarity around an issue in the contract. So I had a teacher who had been disciplined by the principal for a particular, it's hard for me to tell you without being too specific on that, but who had been disciplined for, I'm going to tell you, for teaching something that the principal didn't feel was appropriate to have been taught. Okay, so when you look at just cause, one of the tenets of just cause is, does the person know that what they were doing is wrong, and have they been duly warned about it? And what came to me when the grievance, of course, went to the principal, because this teacher was disciplined, and the teacher said, "I'm grieving this. This is not right." Of course, the principal said, "No." So then it gets kicked up the line to superintendent. So I met with him, and so I just went through the very kind of succinct process and asked those questions and said, "Here are the 7 tenets of just cause, and let's go through them together." And so as a group, we went through them together, and I said, "Okay, here's the one. Did the teacher know that what they were doing was wrong, and were they, duly kind of warned and notified?" And, and the principal said, "Well, they should have known. Like, this is should have known." Now, it wasn't so egregious, because we know in that just cause that if something is so egregious that you could say, yes, it was so egregious, should have known. But it wasn't so egregious. And what the teacher says, "I've been doing the same lesson for years, and no one's ever said anything about it." And so I said to the principal, "Okay, so we would say that in that case, that the teacher, did not know that what they were doing was wrong, and that you did not ever approach them and say, 'Hey, by the way, you need to not do X, Y, and Z.'" So I found in favor of the teacher. Again, one of those situations where did the principal like my decision? I don't think he liked it. Did that principal respect my decision? Absolutely, because I walked them right through the procedure and process. So again, they were grieving the contract, and that's what I said to the principal. They're not grieving you, they're grieving the contract. This is the language in the contract. They need an interpretation. It's like the umpire. They're saying, "Okay, we need interpretation of the rules." A grievance is a clarification of the rules of the game, and my role is to help clarify those rules of the game. And so that's what it is. So approaching it that way, I don't know that I've ever had anything go above me.
Okay.
Because that's, approaching that way, issues get worked out. The other thing is I proactively meet with my union presidents. Even if there's nothing, on the burner, I'll say, "Well, why don't we just get together once a month, let's just meet and chat and just talk about what's going on." And it's amazing how many issues never rise because of those conversations. Things get worked out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. McCauley?
Sure. So, as you're surely aware, many school districts are struggling with their budgets and the challenge of funding their schools properly.
Yeah.
Wilmington has so far managed to avoid some of the most extremely painful measures many districts have had to use, but we still feel the pressure on our budget. Please explain, 1, the process you use to develop a budget.
Yeah.
2, how you present the budget in a way that will gain the support of the school committee, the finance committee, and the town. And 3, what areas do you think are the highest priorities to protect the budget?
Okay, all right. Using those same skills, I apply to the budget as well, the budget development process. I'll just start with, I've never had a budget not pass. I've never run a deficit. I've never not finished a year with a positive fund balance. I think probably, again, assuming that you maybe spoke to the town manager up there, probably told you that he is very pleased with the budgets I bring. And it's a very inclusive, open, and very transparent process, with the question being at every step of the way, tell me how this benefits student learning and student achievement. Okay? How's it tied to our strategic plan? How's this tied to the values of the district? I've added budgets. I've cut budgets. I've done zero-based budgeting. I've done level-funded budgets. I've done level service budgets, and apply that same process all the way through. So in a town, I'll give you some examples, and I think we talked a little bit about it in the room when we were having dinner. Recognizing that the school district consumes more resources than all the other departments in a town combined. The school department consumes more resources vis-a-vis tax dollars than the fire department, the police department, the highway department, the water department, the city offices combined. So the superintendent, as kind of the steward of those tax dollars, has a tremendous responsibility to ensure that those tax dollars are being used efficiently and appropriately. And so some of the conversations that I'll have, especially in towns, and I would have this conversation in Amesbury when I was superintendent, is I would meet with the other department heads in the city, the police chief, the fire chief, and I would have a conversation recognizing that there's only one pot of money. There's only so much money and so many resources to go around. And I would have the conversation about what their needs were, because I wanted to move the needle from it being a us versus them and all of us competing like Hunger Games for the pot of money to a really more collaborative, we're all in this together approach. So I would have conversations with Billy, the police chief, and say, Bill, what are your needs? Tell me what your needs are. Tell me what and he would say, listen, I need a new cruiser desperately. Cruisers are broken out, I can't patrol, and having this conversation, I'd say, look at my budget and say, okay, you know what? I was trying to get science textbooks this year, but you know what? If I can hold those off for one more year, would that allow you, to get your cruiser? And those kinds of conversations and compromises allowed the entire community to see success, because I knew that, that he was keeping the community safe. He needed resources to do that. He needed resources to keep the school safe. And we were all in it together. So it shifted that kind of mindset of we're all competing to a more kind of collaborative. So then when it came time that the school district needed something, that give and take was there. And say, you know what, Billy, listen. He's like, yeah, you know what, I was hoping to get a new cruiser, but that one, we can make that one. We can Band-Aid that one. We can get another year out of that. That's good. So the conversations are a collaborative approach. But the question always comes, when I'm building the budget, how does that improve student achievement? Tell me about that. And by keeping that as the forefront of the conversation, it's where the rubber meets the road. So let me give you a specific example. And this is absolutely a true example, and this is not to put anyone down or granted, this is just how the conversation went. So I'm meeting with my technology director, and he's presenting his budget and his needs, and in it, he had a significant amount of money for Apple TVs. And so, of course, I asked the question, okay, this is a pretty significant, okay, tell me what are these Apple TVs going to be used for? Tell me how they're going to advance student learning. And his answer, and again, this is not to criticize anyone, I don't want you to, but his answer was, well, the teachers really like them because they can show movies while they're doing their grades. That answer didn't then make that so that those Apple TVs were included in the budget. That was not the answer that was going to get those included. So then I followed up with, okay, have you had a conversation with the director of curriculum about what are the tools needed to advance it, and is this a tool that's needed to advance it? So those conversations hadn't taken place. There was no conversation between the technology director, the curriculum director, the teachers. It was just, he was going through kind of his rote list of, these are the things that need to be updated, these are the things we need, and I'm going to move forward, without that conversation taking place. And so when I press on that conversation about, tell me, how does that resource, how is that going to advance student learning? And I couldn't get an answer that showing that it was going to advance student learning, then that didn't go in the budget. It doesn't mean that we didn't put other resources in the technology that would, but those then items could get anything that was in that budget could be directly attributed to supporting the goals of the district, supporting student achievement, supporting the strategic plan. What's really nice about when you do that is that there is no fluff in the budget. So I have to go in front of the towns, and I go to the towns and say, here we are in the budget process. And one of the folks that was in the audience at one of the towns said, this is really the first time we've actually looked forward to the superintendent coming to these meetings, because the budgets I'm bringing forward have absolutely minimal increases. One of the teachers, when talking about budgets earlier today, one of the teachers said, well, what does that mean, like in terms of the teachers? And I said, what it means is that I really look at our resources and our needs really specifically. Now, I had mentioned that, I have, there are 30 kindergartners and 3 kindergarten teachers with 10 in a class. If I only had 2 kindergartens, it would put 15 in a class, and that's very reasonable. But I have not cut any teachers. The school committee hasn't cut any teachers, we haven't cut any teachers. But what I'll do is look at attrition. So if one of those kindergarten teachers retires, will I look to fill that position? The answer is no. But see, in doing so, by looking at that, now I have two kindergarten classes with 15 in each. I've been able to reduce the expenditure of the $85,000 of the salary and benefits, and no one lost a job. So it's constantly looking at it through that lens and being real efficient. The other thing is, and don't tell Paul this, but one of the best things superintendents can do is allow their business manager to say no. It's kind of like mom and dad sometimes with the superintendent. Superintendent's like, oh, yeah, we can get that, we can get that, we can get that. And meanwhile, the poor business manager's looking at the budget like, there's no money, like I can't, And so having a really good relationship with your business manager and allowing your business manager to say to the superintendent, right, who's their boss, but saying to the saying, no, the answer is no. You can't get, that's not in the budget, or how are you going to come up with the money? And allowing the business manager to feel safe and support, to ask, to say no to the superintendent. Folks, superintendents do not get run out of town because the MCAS scores went down. Superintendents get run out of town because they mismanaged the budget. And it doesn't take us long to look around here in the greater area and see how many districts are in real trouble with their budgets. This is not a criticism, but by not really minding that store, it is the superintendent's responsibility. We are the stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. It is a responsibility to ensure that our resources, again, being the largest consumer of them, that those resources are used efficiently and are used directly to advance student learning. So that's how I come at budgets, coming with very reasonable increases that my town managers always absolutely appreciate, and they'll tell you straight up, there is no fluff in his budgets. There's nothing that we can ask a question about that he can't answer about how it's tied directly to the students and to the learning. And my budgets get passed. I have not ever had a budget not get passed, and I've never run a budget in a deficit.
Thank you. Mr. Golden.
Thank you. All right. The responsibilities of a superintendent are numerous and can pile up quickly in short periods of time. What do you do to make sure every part of your work gets the attention it deserves?
Yeah. Hire good people and then get out of their way. Again, when you really create this and where you are supporting the people around you, there is not any moment where I can do it all. Nor do I think I'm the smartest person in the room, nor do I think I'm more capable than anyone else. There are some really talented and capable people here in the district that are doing the good work. A lot of them, what they need is to be supported in doing that good work. And so I kind of look at someone years ago when I was in the city, said, oh my God, like how do you, I think I had 2,400 employees. And people were like, oh my God, like how do you do that? And I explained that being a superintendent is like being the conductor of an orchestra. I don't play all the instruments. What I do is make sure that the people who are playing theirs at the right time, making sure this one comes up, that the strings are coming. And so you're supporting and providing, letting the people play their instruments and helping and guiding them to do that. But you're not playing the instruments, right? Superintendents in large cities are the conductor of the orchestra. In a small town like I'm in now, you're more like the leader of the town band, right? Which means that, if the van breaks down, you got to figure out, okay, my God, how are we going to get to the next gig because the van broke down? Or, the drummer's out sick, now I got to jump in and play the drums. So the role changes a little bit, but that's still kind of the role that, you're supporting those folks that do their job, you're holding expectations about, but you're supporting them to do it, and you're jumping in when needed. But if you have some really good people around you and you're supporting them to do it, the work gets done collaboratively together.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah.
I love the comparison you're drawing there between your town and city experience. Could you expand upon kind of that day-to-day difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I'll use the example certainly of special ed director, right? So in a large city, the special ed directors, but oftentimes you have a number of coordinators. You have a number of building-based special ed facilitators. There's a number of backups with it. In a small town, there's the special ed director, and then no one. So that person leaves, or they're just, believe it or not, they're just out sick. And when 63, it's a really small, little kind of rural district. So when the principal's out, they step in. I'll give you a great example. So the basketball season comes, the middle school gym is booked right up. So we had an A team and a B team. And so we needed to use one of the elementary schools for the B team practices, right? B team was practicing at the elementary school. Right? So now the trick became, how did we get the B team boys from the middle school over to the elementary school after school to practice? Right? So they needed someone to drive the van. So we had, school van. So guess who drives the van? So the superintendent drove the van every day with 6 middle school boys every day over to the elementary school. And in a small town, that's what you do, right? I was like, I got a driver's license. Yep, I'm qualified. Yep, I can drive the van. In a city, there'd be a whole lot of other people to drive the van. But in a small town, those boys needed to get from the middle school to the elementary school. And when you looked around the room, it wasn't like, okay, well, it's all, like, I'll do it. I can do it. Well, so I drove the kids over to basketball every day in the van. They got a kick out of it, and I kind of did too, actually. It was pretty fun. But, there's another example of that. You see a need, you just jump in. It's kind of is, play principal. If the lunch ladies are out sick, I've served lunch on more than one occasion, in my time, and you just jump in. It's we're on the same team.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, we've got 15 minutes left. I'm going to skip the next question, and Mr. Turner, we're going to move to yours.
Okay,
Number
very good.
12.
Thank you. Can you please tell us about how you work alongside your school committees? Please include examples of your communication practices and your successes and lessons learned from past experiences.
Yeah. Every school committee is different. I think I had had some conversations with folks about how vastly different the role of a school committee is in Massachusetts versus Maine and other places. Ed reform law came in Massachusetts and really defined and limited the role of a school committee and defined it by law as to what the school committee's role is and what powers the school committees have and what powers they don't have. And that was defined by statute years ago. That's very different than in the state of Maine. State of Maine is very locally controlled. So an example, in the state of Massachusetts by law, all the employees are employees of the superintendent. Right? Superintendent's an employee of the school committee, but all the principals, the administrators, the teachers, everyone else are employees of the superintendent by law. In Maine, everyone is an employee of the school committee. We call them school boards in Maine, but everyone's an employee of the school board. So that's very different. So the role of superintendent in that case, a lot of times I act more as a facilitator, as a guide, because I don't have the same authority by law that you would in Massachusetts. So let's use the examples, a fictitious example, but you'll understand it. Let's say that there's a principal in this district that's I've been working with, evaluating, and said, okay, this is a principal that definitely needs some growth, but but they're growing and they're doing a good job, and that principal gave your kid 3 detentions. And you're like, I hate that guy. That guy gave my kid 3 detentions. He's terrible. I hate, I don't like the ties he wears. He's absolutely, not that you would do that, but he's absolutely horrible and terrible, right? As a school committee, you don't have the authority to remove that principal, right? It's up to the superintendent to say, hey, you need to trust me. This is a principal that, he's got some weaknesses, but here are the skills that he or she has. Here are the things I'm working on with her. This is, and have that rule. In Maine, the school committee has the ultimate decision on that. As a superintendent, I can say that same thing. Hey, this is a principal that has, here are the gains they've made, here are the growth, here are the skills. And if the school committee says, we don't like them, they're gone, because they have that authority. So the role of superintendent really is pretty significantly different. It's funny, as I was sitting out there taking a break, so of course, because when things become public, with, I don't know, between Facebook and everything else, it's amazing how many school committee members still from Haverhill and other districts are from here that said, hey, if they need to speak to anyone about you, have them give me a call. If there's anything I can do, I'll be willing to come to their meeting and speak on your behalf. And that same thing, I think, applies. That in terms of building that respect, that rapport, and I think you folks are feeling some of that just from the conversations we have. And that's the same thing I do. I have a wonderful group of people now that I work with. Truly enjoy them. Besides the fact that we do some work, I'll tell you honestly that sometimes after school committee meetings, we all go out together. And we have a whole heck of a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. Because the reality is, it is hard work, right? It's tough work. But if you're truly enjoying the people that you're doing it with and you have a nice rapport with them, it makes the hard work more fun. Then again, that doesn't mean that we'll always agree. Truly, it doesn't. But if we have that mutual respect and we've built that rapport and we've built that trust, then I may not like the decisions that the school committee makes. You may not like the decisions that I make. But we'll come to a point where we can respect each other's decisions. And that's how districts move forward. That's how districts are successful. Because the reality is you folks cannot make decisions based on whether or not everyone's going to like them. You can't, right? You can't make decisions on whether to think that the superintendent's going to like every decision that you make. I'm not going to make decisions that all of you are going to like, right? I call off a snow day. Some of you are going to say, what are you, nuts? It wasn't that bad. I can't believe you called off school. Half of you will say, thank God you called off school. The roads were terrible, right? But I can't make the decision based on who's going to like it. But if you know I made the decision based on what's safe for the district, ensuring that people were safe, that the bus drivers didn't feel safe on the roads, you're going to say, it's not the call I would have made, but I know how we made that decision. I'm going to respect it. I've had a really good relationship with my chairs. Mayor Ferrantini, who is the mayor of Haverhill, I certainly have have had a great relationship with them. Again, ties into that budget, working very closely with my mayors. Ken Gray, who was another one of my mayors, who was just an absolute fabulous guy. We did we were really close in doing the Amesbury building project together. He just passed away recently, which is a shame. But he was a wonderful guy and a great relationship with him. And I have great relationships with my school committee and my board chairs now. Again, it doesn't mean we always agree, folks. There are plenty of times where I may not agree with them, but we have that rapport and we have that mutual trust and we have that mutual respect that says, okay, yeah, we may not agree, but I understand it. I respect your decision on that. And that's what I would expect with this group as well, too. I truly don't, I don't expect nor do I want you to make decisions based on whether or not I'll like them, right? I don't want you to do that. I want you to make decisions that are the right decisions to make, have the courage to do so. And when I know that's how you guys are making decisions, that we'll have that trust and respect that I may not like it, but I'll respect it. And that's how districts are successful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Over here?
yes, you should go.
And then you can just tell us what's next? Okay.
Yep.
How do you evaluate the effectiveness of administrators and teachers? How do you retain and attract effective administrators and teachers?
Yeah.
How do you address their areas of growth?
Yeah. I hate to sound, but obviously I apply a similar. Now, this, of course, Massachusetts has rubrics that have to be followed upon. But much like I talked about going down to New York and talking about that, how do you create a culture where teachers feel safe to take positive risks and not be worried that taking that risk and that positive risk is going to be detrimental, okay? And that's about that culture building. So let me give you a specific example. I walked in, this fairly new teacher, and I walked into her classroom, and the kids had just come back from our class where they were making puppets, right? So they had just come back from our class with making puppets. They still had the puppets that they had made in our class on their desk. They're playing with the puppets. The poor teacher, I walk in, and it's just like it was just crazy, kind of chaos in the room, right? So I come in, I watch it, and she's just struggling. She's just struggling to regain the class, trying to regain control. It was in the afternoon, and the wheels had just kind of come off the wagon. And so I said, okay, so I sat through the lesson and stuff. And then afterwards, I was just talking to her. I said, so, tell me how you went. She's like, oh, my God, it was, like the kids, they had come back. They were wound up. They'd come. They're playing with their puppets. It was hard to get them back out of She understood all the things that she needed to work on. Now, I, as the evaluator, if I had just said, yup, and just hammered her for that, would I have a teacher that was more willing to be engaged, more willing to take risks, more? No, I would have had a teacher that was like, oh, my God. But I recognized, like, yeah, you had that was a tough one. You could, here's what maybe I would have done. I would have stopped first and said, hey, you know what? Let's clear our desks. Let's put all the puppets over there on the shelf and kind of regroup the kids. Gave some strategies, but I wasn't in there to hammer. And recognizing, and again, that same kind of thing about having that rapport, building that trust, with administrators is the same way. I'm very proud of the fact that many of the administrators that I've mentored over the years have gone on to either, to be superintendents themselves, or gone on to assistant principals, have gone on to be principals. And that's a great source of pride for me. I had an assistant principal come to me just a couple weeks ago and was really nervous to tell me that she was looking in other districts because she wanted to be a principal. And she was so nervous. And I said, kid, absolutely, this is not a prison sentence. My job is not to keep you here. My job is to help you grow and go. I said, I'll be incredibly proud if I know that I supported you, that you've learned enough, that I've given you the skills to be a principal in your own building. That's my job. My job is to help you grow and go. And that same kind of thing applies with administrators. Now, have I had to non-renew teachers? Absolutely. Have I had to terminate tenured teachers? Yes, I have. But even in those cases, I would say, speak with the union president about that. Because, again, not like the decision, but respect it. They knew that that teacher had been supported, that there was really clear expectations, that there was support to achieve those expectations. And when push came to shove, the process was fair, it was transparent, and they understood it. So, but again, that all ties to the way that you do things, and doing things in an area that actually builds capacity, not minimizes it.
So, Mr. Fulgoni, we've got 4 minutes left, and so I would bring us to the very last question on our list, which is, what questions do you have for us?
Yeah. So, it's a question that's probably not typical, and I did ask it at the screening committee, and I think Dr. Bryson was there and answered it, and I think looking around to see if anyone else. So I think maybe Paul was in the room and answered it as well too, but. I'm in a really unique position in my career where I get to have choice about how I spend my time now. And again, recognizing that I only was supposed to be up there for 3 months, but stayed for 3 years because I truly enjoy the people I work with. I enjoy the work that we're doing. There's some tough conversations taking place around consolidation, but it's good work. And I'm working with a really good group of people to advance that district and help them out. I've been called by a number of districts in the area, because let's face it, there's a lot of superintendencies out there, there's a lot of districts looking for interims to come and help them. What I'm not interested in doing is going to a place where, and I've turned some down because what they were looking for is something that I don't want to do. I'm not looking to come into a district to be the hatchet man, to say, oh God, there's 46 positions that we got to cut. The $13 million override didn't go through, so now we've got to decimate, we've got to figure out how to cut sports, cut foreign language, because I'm not interested in doing that stuff. I'm truly interested, and I don't mind the hard work, but I also want to come to a place where I can truly enjoy it. The reality is, folks, I've just spent, by the time I get home, it'll be about 15 hours today, right? That is more time that I'm going to get to see my wife and dog. My kids aren't home anymore, so I don't get to see them as much as I'd like. But the reality is, you folks are here. You're spending more time with me than you are with your own families. And in order for me to want to do that, right, I want to do that in a place where I'm truly going to enjoy it, where people have a sense of humor, where they recognize that this is truly only a movie, right? That yes, we'll do some really hard work. Yes, there's some difficult conversations to have, but we're going to do it and we're going to respect each other and have that trust. So I'm really looking for a place where I want to be. So tell me about the culture that's here from your answer as to why I would want to become part of that. What's it like to be here? Because I need to know that. I need to know that if I'm, leaving those folks up there and coming down, that I'm coming and it's gonna be a place where I look forward every day to showing up, where I know we're gonna have some laughs. Nothing wrong with having a good sense of humor, folks. The world is a crazy place. Sometimes you gotta laugh at it, right? But that we're gonna have some laughs, we're gonna do some hard work together, but we're gonna truly enjoy doing that together. So tell me about that so that I know it's a place I wanna be.
Great question.
Can I
Mr.
just-
Golden, you can start.
Thank you. So being the most recent addition to this school committee, I've kind of come to it with an outsider's perspective into this district. And I moved here 2-3 years ago. So I'm learning the town,
Yeah.
frankly, in a similar, somewhat way. And I'll say that I've been thoroughly impressed with the process-oriented nature of this committee. I've definitely lived in and observed other communities where school committees, school boards can be factional, can be very divisive. And I've found this body to be really collegial. Great sense of humor. We have a lot of fun. I like to think while getting the work done, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I do think that if I were to have a thesis statement or a big takeaway, it's if you're looking for a group of people who are focused on the work and having a consistent rules-based process that is fair and equitable. These guys, not myself. Sounds like I'm aggrandizing myself. I don't mean that.
yeah.
Literally coming to it, that's what I have found myself.
Yeah.
I was honestly expecting it to be more fractious because that's what I've seen from other school
Sure.
boards.
Yeah, there's some out there, that's
Is
for sure.
just personalities kind of bickering.
Yeah.
That's the complete opposite from this group.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to the rest of the district as well as they can, but that's what I've observed from this
Yeah.
7.
And to be fair, that's what I've heard, but, so I'm not asking a question I don't kind of already know the answer to, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't waste my time or yours, but I do appreciate you saying that, because it is nice to hear the perspective from you folks as well about what it feels like, what's it like to be here every day, and why, you talk about, what do you do to retain and entice folks to come? When I left Haverhill and went to Amesbury, I had 2 principals that came with me. Now, we fair and open search process, but they said, I want to work for you again. And I had a number of teachers that did the same thing, that came, and I have, and then I've had folks that said, listen, wherever you end up, you let us know. I would love to work for you again. So, that same kind of thing. So I do, recognize that in you folks, but it is nice to hear from you as well about what's it like, what's it like, what's it feel like?
Quickly,
Quick.
yes.
Yeah. So something that I can speak of myself that may resonate well with you is I think we're always kind of chasing improvement here. And, Dr. Brand has done a lot of great work for the district over his past tenure. And you're now seeing that trickle down to a lot of the administrators and all the school buildings where all the schools are now improving and really performing at really great levels. But as I'm sure you're aware, we can always do better. We can always improve.
Yeah.
And this won't be an environment where we're going to ask you to come in to, make heads roll or do anything. It's going to be like, how can you help support us in helping continuously improve this district?
Thank you. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. So, and I've heard from some of you, so not a quiz, but I just, leave you with that's the question that I ask. So I do appreciate it. And I appreciate your time. It was a long day. It's a longer day for you folks, than it is even for me, but I do appreciate it, and I appreciated the conversation, so.
Mr. Axel, you get the last comment.
All right. I'll just, I think I'll add one more thing that I think Wilmington as a district is good at keeping things in perspective. That we're chasing, academic excellence. We want our kids to learn. We want them to thrive. But we don't think that happens at the expense of their general well-being, of being able to kind of have some have fun in school. That we are trying to overall kind of take a larger look than just, maximize every point on the MCAS, and if that didn't happen, then somehow we failed. That there's just an overall sense of that we absolutely have high standards, but at the same time, we're not trying to drive our kids to kind of sometimes the frenzied levels that you see where everything about their self-esteem is riding on the college they get into or their SAT score and so forth. And a lot of our stuff has been really good, but that we don't necessarily just think that that's the most important thing and the only way that we measure ourselves.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate it. So nice.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Mr. Fulgoni, thank you
Absolutely,
for your time.
folks. Thank you.
Greatly
I
appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spending the day in the district, getting to learn a little bit about us, and,
Yeah.
and getting to learn a little bit about
Yeah,
you as well. So,
Absolutely.
With that, we will be in recess until 8:45.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
oh, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it right away. Mr. Thomson sent me another one, has to pee in it. Yeah, so called again, third time. So it's one of those things.
One of those things.
Constantly spelling.
Recording in progress.
All right, good evening and welcome back. Our second candidate this evening is Dr. David Thomson. Dr. Thomson is currently the Interim Superintendent of the Mashpee Public Schools and has also held roles as Superintendent of the Norwood Public Schools, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Assessment, Technology, and ELL at the Blackstone Millville Regional School District, amongst others. Dr. Thomson, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, great to be here.
So I have the pleasure of having the first question. So, Dr. Thomson, if you could, take a moment to summarize your work experience and why you would like to be superintendent in Wilmington.
Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to visit our community and talk with
Yes.
members of our school staff, so please include observations or anecdotes that were particularly memorable.
Okay, well, I guess I will start with that. So I want to thank everyone for a fantastic day. and I was able to visit all of the schools, meet with your incredible staff. I don't think I've seen a staff with as much joy as in other districts. It really was contagious. Students who were engaged, happy, obviously your social emotional learning piece and your support of students is there in spades. And your leadership team, enthusiastic, very proud of the buildings, proud of what's going on there, and that is with good reason. They witnessed high-quality curriculum materials across the district. There obviously is very good and well-established instructional practices throughout, but the climate and culture of the schools is something that, with my experience, doing school reviews as a state and national principal leader, visiting schools all over the country, something that I'm pretty attuned to, and I would definitely, was handing out 5 stars or A+, that would be the case here, which really kind of demonstrates the work that this district has done, which then goes back to why would I want to be in Wilmington? And basically the work here lines up with the work that I have done previously and the work that I am very passionate about with career-connected learning, portrait of the graduate work and connecting that and ensuring students have a path when they leave our schools, an idea what they want to do. And those really line up, so it would be enjoyable and fun to take that and continue that work here. As far as my experience, I think you kind of captured I've been working in central office now for 12 years. 8 as a superintendent, 3 as assistant superintendent. Before that, I was a middle school principal, which does mean I'm going to heaven, for 11 years. Was the 2010 Middle School Principal of the Year for the state of Massachusetts. I have been the president of the State Principals Association and also spent 4 years on the National Principals Association Board of Directors. All of that experience leads to a leadership focus and experience that I have that is kind of unusual. I bring a collaborative and it's past my bedtime, collaborative and adaptive leadership style to the district. I look at coming in and improving the people that are here and the systems that are here, and that is contextual. In other words, I'm going to come in, do an entry plan, and try to figure out what could be done in a strategic way, working with my leadership team, my principals, the staff, to make Wilmington better and keep growing.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner. Stephen Turner. As an interim candidate, how do you view the role of an interim superintendent stewarding activities already underway, like the strategic plan, curriculum improvement, hiring, and evaluation of the staff?
Yeah, so I mean, so this is not a retirement gig. This is an active piece, an active work. So you have a well-established strategic plan that you are well invested in. It would be my job as the interim superintendent to continue and keep the progress and the intention that has already been decided in this community moving forward. And I think that's important to note. It's not going to be a year taking a step back. It's going to be continually working forward. In order to do that, I'm going to need to come in, build relationships. I strongly believe in visiting when schools are in session. So if I was fortunate enough to be the choice, I would want to spend some time, obviously coordinate with Dr. Brand, coordinate to come and visit the district, spend some more time in the district, get a sense of how the schools are working a little bit more, and continue that work, start building relationships, start meeting with people, and start that entry plan in the spring when the schools are functioning. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to start on July 1 when everybody is away for the summer. I think it's important that some of that work and establishing that, meeting with school committee, town manager, folks like that, detailed conversation with the business manager, talking about the budget and such, to ensure that coming in July, I have a good direction on what is going on to pick up and go forward.
Dr. McCauley.
Yep, thank you. As the new superintendent, how would you go about building relationships of trust and collaboration with faculty and staff? Secondly, how would you go about building trust with parents and the community at large?
Yeah.
Give examples of the types of media you might use and the tone, style, or manner you try to express.
Yeah, there's two aspects of this. One is being authentic and present, and being so you have to be true to yourself, and that has to come through. And if you've ever spent any time with kids, they can pick out anybody who's not being authentic right away, right? Know who you are, know what your strengths are, know what you bring to the table. The second piece is being proactive. So being present. What are those key things in Wilmington that really, the superintendent should be involved with and be present at? And there's different opportunities. Some you're speaking at, some you're there just as a resource, but meeting with the PTO, the CPAC, and again, this is part of the entry plan, and really listening to learn, not listening to respond, but listening to learn, and going at it with a curious mindset, and by doing that, by sitting, giving people time, you start building relationships and building trust. It is something that happens over time. It's something that I've done now in what, eight different districts. I've practiced it a lot. I've done it pretty quickly, and are able to build relationships just because of that authenticity and that appreciation and gratitude that I bring to the work. So meeting with groups, being at events, holding chances for back and forth conversation, be it a coffee, be it some sort of forum that, and again, looking at what has been done and building upon that. I do, one of the things that I started this year was doing a podcast, and it's focused on district-wide events and things that we're doing, and I've done everything from interviewing the football captains after the state championship game to interviewing the incoming superintendent to introduce her to the community. And I actually have a following. Don't tell anybody. My younger daughter thinks it's really kind of funny, but that's okay. We'll talk about that later. But again, looking for those ways to communicate and reach out to people is important. And people are traveling to work, and a podcast. You can find me on Spotify. It's the Superintendent Spotlight podcast. So, just trying to get a few more followers. But looking at different ways to interact with people and get the information out. The reality is, if the superintendent is not out there telling the story and able to answer the questions, then people create their own story. So, and that proactive piece, that building relationships piece is important, because if there's a question, I want someone to call. The other piece that I do is I always get back to someone within 24 hours. If someone calls, someone emails, I get back to them. If I can't get back to them because I'm traveling somewhere or something like that line, my assistant, I ask them to call the person and say, Dr. Thomson has read your email, heard your voicemail. He can't talk to you today, but he will call you tomorrow. That way people know that that I've heard them and got back. The thing that I constantly hear the last few years is, I wouldn't have heard from somebody before. No one would have answered my phone call. And even the tough phone calls, those are sometimes the more important piece, finding common ground, hearing and listening with curiosity, and you might not solve the problem or agree, but at least people feel heard and valued. You're welcome.
Quick follow-up on that.
Please.
So that was mostly discussing community relations. Can you talk a little bit more about building trust and relationships with faculty and staff?
Yeah. Again, so my favorite place to be is in the classroom and watching people do the great work with our kids. And it's kind of funny because every place, I don't think this will be the case here, but other places where I've gone, people stop and they look at me like I'm going to say something or criticize them or whatever. I'm coming to see what is going on, to get a sense of what is going on, to learn how to support people and help them grow. And if they grow, they can help kids. So if you're walking in with that kind of mindset and you get that across to your staff and that you have their best interest in heart and we're all working together to meet our kids' needs, you quickly kind of build that trust together. So again, it's similar. I mean, you're listening. Part of my entry process would be meeting with teachers. And meeting with groups of teachers, meeting with union leadership, and that goes kind of a long way. And, the one thing that because you can't always say yes, right? Sometimes you have to say no or make a decision people aren't going to be happy with, but every opportunity you have, you should be putting a positive coin in the piggy bank. So when things are not going well, people know that what your real intent is. And that's, I have people come into my office with health issues, family issues, and helping them solve those, being respectful with the union leadership and helping them and communicating with them, and word gets out. That's how I approach it. Okay, community-wise, I mean, do you want to get into like selectmen and town manager and that sort of piece too, or is that a different question?
Well, let's stop. Let's pause.
Okay,
Stop
all
it
right.
for now, so we can get to the next question, which I also have.
Mr. Ragsdale, you have the next question anyways.
Wilmington is currently involved in an MSBA project with, we have a big town meeting vote and debt exclusion vote coming up in September.
Yep.
Can you share your experience with major capital improvement projects,
Yep.
specifically working with the MSBA in order to gain community support?
Yeah, so I have had several from, core repairs, roofs, boilers, back early on in Norwood, and then a massive $159 million middle school project that we took from the statement of interest all the way through to approval and, got the fancy shovel and, breaking ground and all of that. So, and some of us we've had some other conversations, but I'll say it here for the people at home. It's a long process, but it's a really good process because you actually check all the boxes and you don't necessarily have problems because you're marching through a prescribed way of doing it. It's a little frustrating because it takes at least 7 years to get there. But, even going so I inherited a building study. Norwood has 6 elementary schools, all of which are old, the oldest of which is probably 119 years old now, the youngest of which is 65 years old, and a middle school that was built in 1965 that really was quickly put together and not put together well. So it was falling apart. The recommendation from our building study was that the middle school was where to go, that was what we should start with. And, went through the process of applying. We got in on the first try because the building was not great. It was falling apart. And for those of you who don't know, the MSBA looks at the statement of interest and then takes the 5 or 10 or whatever number of projects they're going to fund that year, the worst of those projects, and those are the ones that get funded and put through the piece. So building the support, helping the town manager assemble the building committee, hiring the architect, the owner's project manager, all of those pieces that I know you guys are further along with that at this point. The planning of the educational plan for that. Another twist that we had was that it currently is a 6 through 8 middle school, but in order to solve another problem, which was space, we really needed to move the 5th grade up to the middle school, which is a whole different community conversation because you're putting elementary kids in with the 8th graders and, the age difference, but what I did, and again, this comes back to my experience, what I did was I pushed for a design of a school that had different floors for different grades. So the 5th grades were here, the 6th grade was here, the 7th grade was here, the 8th grade was here. They were not mixing in 2 lunchrooms and that sort of thing. So, and again, that design process to make sure that it was going to be a vibrant learning community, a vibrant learning place, one that was flexible enough to grow for the next 50-plus years and was going to fit the needs of the students. So the 5th grade students are still 5th grade students, and they're still going to be taught like 5th graders. They just happen to be in this other building. That was approved. That was accepted by town meeting. We had 2 dissenting votes. Norwood has a representative town meeting. And then it passed the ballot piece by 80%. It did help that no one had any sort of affiliation or love for that building, but it was definitely well past this prime. I think I was telling, when I met with the parents, they asked the same question, and I explained, I told the story of, so MSBA comes out and visits the building and does an assessment as part of that process. The electrical person came back and he was visibly shaken because of what he had seen. That's how bad the building was. So then, we break ground. We hired an incredible team to do the construction. And when I left, we were 3 months ahead of schedule and $10 million under budget. Okay, so now go to Mashpee. In Mashpee, I was thrust into a project that was not started off well. They did not go through MSBA. Massive problems with that. It was not on time. It was not going to be under budget. And I had to really push, get the town manager called him and said, we are way behind schedule. We're not going to be able to open the building. That's how bad this project was going. Got support from him, support from DPW. Push. We did get it finished and we're able to open the building. There's still a couple things we're working on. Currently, we're in the middle of another core repair project through MSBA for an HVAC system at the middle high school in Mashpee. Lucky enough that I was, in that from the beginning. And we have, a great owner's project manager and a great design team to do that. And we're having great, the construction will happen over the summer, but we're off to a good start.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Bryson.
What has been your role in the academic success of students? Please also describe how you have supported and strengthened special education in your district by providing specific examples.
Could you read that again?
What has been your role in the academic success of students? Mm-hmm. And please describe how you have supported and strengthened special education in your district.
Okay, so that is the core function of what we're doing, and that has been my passion for ever since I was in the classroom, and it's taken different shapes in different places, and again, that contextual piece is important. When I was in Blackstone Millville, there was a serious curriculum issue. They did not have high-quality curriculum, so that was the emphasis that we worked on, and that was bringing in a modern math program, that was bringing in and revising an ELA program, and training teachers how to use it as well. A little bit of resistance there, had to do some, because it was very different. They had not put money into curriculum in probably about 10 or 12 years. So was able to get the support of the school committee of the regional district to do that work. So, basically got those two programs in. I left, I looked back a couple years later. The scores were now going up. I'll go back a little bit further. You asked about special ed. At Raynham Middle School, the achievement gap was mostly attributed to our special ed students, students with disabilities. We designed a program where we were pushing in services and fully including kids as much as possible. Changed the model, the delivery model, and part of that is convincing parents to come with us on this journey. But I had a whole group of kids who were being pulled for this and pulled for that, and they were taken away from the curriculum, the grade level curriculum in the classroom. So instead, we changed the model, so we're pushing in and supporting kids in the classroom, doing grade level work. So between that and what we would now call an MTSS model of progress monitoring and intervention, those two pieces put together closed that gap, and Raynham Middle School became a level 1 school. That work that I was doing, I was sharing with other principals in the state, which is why I was the principal of the year. The important thing that I think you realize about that work is that, we created a team. I had teachers, leaders helping me do that work. And that leadership model and that collaborative piece continued on. Raynham Middle School was a level 1 school 3 years after I left. And I'm very proud of that. because of the work that we had done to get there, but I'm even more proud of the fact that we had established something that continued on and still served kids. So then, jump back the other way to Norwood. In Norwood, one of our big challenges was English language learners. We were above 17% by the time I left 600 kids, 37 different languages. But the problem was that we were having kids spending too much time in level 1 and level 2. Okay, and again, it comes back to curriculum instruction, what we're doing in the classroom. We looked at our EL curriculum. There wasn't a consistent curriculum and dedicated EL teachers, but there was not a curriculum that was aligned to the WIDA standards. So we, brought in new curriculum, finally got enough funding to bring in an EL coordinator and focus on tier 1 and on level 1 and level 2 instruction, so that we could then do push-in services with the EL kids, and those gaps are starting to close. A little more difficult because the tests are in English, so you don't always see the results right away, but one of the things that I'm really proud of is that the school that has 60% EL students in it, those kids, when you look at your top 20, make up at least 50% of your top 20 graduates in the class graduating every single year because of the work that these incredible teachers do in that school. So, just a little busy. Yeah, but it's kind of funny because this gives you the opportunity to really think back on it, and sometimes we don't do that. It's not an I thing, it really is a we thing. It's empowering teachers and giving teachers the right tools, the time to collaborate, the time to come together and look at student work and really move that forward. Teachers, that's why they got into it, right? That's why they got into teaching, was to do this kind of work. And when you see it pay off, it really is rewarding.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Nicholas Golden. I'm the newest member of the school committee. One of the strategic objectives in Wilmington's strategic plan is to create equitable and inclusive schools. What will you do to ensure all students are welcome in our district? And how do you ensure responsiveness to parent concerns that their children may not be made to feel welcome?
Yeah, that really, so my core philosophy is that every person, student and staff, should be able to come into our schools and feel welcomed, feel that they are part of the community, that they belong, and that they are valued. One of the things that I saw today was around PBIS and the work that you folks have done around social emotional learning, the support that you have for social emotional support. I think you have made really good strides with that. It really is a mindset, and making equity is making sure that kids are getting what they need, not more than what they need, but what they need. So really knowing our students and making them feel like they belong, and that's not just we're happy to see you, that's also knowing them as learners, monitoring their growth, celebrating their growth, talking about them individually with them, having them celebrate their growth. And if a kid does not feel connected to the school and valued, they're not in a position to learn. I don't. So, and again, it's only been one day, but I'm not seeing, what I saw today was very happy, engaged students who seem to be vibrant in these classrooms. So, I would look to see, where, if there are we measuring our SEL, capabilities and qualities there? And are we doing interventions for kids who are not meeting them to make sure of that? How are the ways that we are celebrating differences that we have and diversity of ethnicity, religion, what have you, and how are we making sure that this is a place where kids feel that they can belong and are not an other? So,
Thank you.
welcome.
And so I guess if I may, a follow-up to that, if a student goes home and tells their parents that they don't feel that welcome, that engaged, that involved, and the parent comes to you with that concern, how do you then address that?
Yeah, basically, it needs to go back to, the classroom and the building ultimately. But you need to, you need to hear so when parents call and they're concerned about their kids, you need to hear and validate their concerns, okay? You can't say, oh, yeah, I've heard that before. So parents are not calling, if they're calling about something with a kid, they need to feel that they're heard. So with that, we need to direct them to the source of where the rub might be happening to address it. More often than not, that's the classroom. And then, the classroom principal, and moving it up from the chain of command from there. But my experience has been, if a child is feeling that people will bend over backwards to make sure that is rectified. But it's to ensure, and then if it's not happening, or if they're not getting where they need to get to, then they need to contact me again. Thank you. Welcome.
Sorry, Mr. Samaha.
Thank you. The Wilmington Middle School has recently undergone a program review in partnership with the Association for Middle Level Education, AMLE. We have also recently hired a permanent principal and looking forward to seeing continued improvement and success. What has been your experience in helping to guide and shape school culture and school improvement, especially at the middle school level?
Yeah, I've done a lot of that. So I'll kind of go back. I'll put my old principal hat on, and again, back to that safe space. People feeling valued. So I will often say culture beats strategy, and what I mean by that is having the right kind of culture in the school is extremely important to student success. So, what I did was, and again, being mean to each other is not okay. Whether we call it bullying or whatever it might be, it's just not okay. We need to be addressing those behaviors. We also need to be saying what kind of behaviors we're looking for. All right, and saying these are the positive behaviors we want to see in our school. These are our values. All right, and establishing them, and it's not just the principal and the assistant principal's job. Every adult in the building needs to be involved with that, and the kids. Okay, and I'll tell you one of the things I saw today. I walked through one of the schools, and in the library, they were doing a lesson on anti-bullying and upstanding and bystanding. I'm like, hallelujah. Okay? You're actually teaching the kids the kinds of behaviors that you're looking for. I would tell my kids, I don't expect you to get along with everybody and love everybody every single day, but I do expect you to be tolerant and kind, and if someone's bothering you, just get up, turn, and walk away. You don't need to address it. You don't need to yell back at them. And this is simple civil behavior that unfortunately I think sometimes we've, especially in the last 5 or so years, we seem to have lost. But that's the expectation. And when you consistently go back to, this is what our expectation is, what did we do wrong? And those restorative practices about what you are expecting, and does this fit in our culture, all right? And then got the student council involved in leading activities around that, okay? And then had adults celebrating children's successes beyond academics. We had a wall of fame that would celebrate kid getting their Eagle Scout, kid, getting a babysitting award. We had a kid that saved his younger sister from choking from the Heimlich maneuver that we taught in health class. So all these bricks are on the wall for all these things that are outside of like the normal honor roll report card sort of thing, to celebrate kids and what they bring to our school. So if that's kind of your mentality, it becomes contagious. And I knew that I had gotten there when we had a student move from Brockton City to Rainham. And we always would have them pair up with a bunch of kids, and after like the 3rd day, this kid started vibrating. We'll use the word vibrating, but started to behave in a way that was not conducive. And the other kids at the table turned to this kid and say, hey, that's not cool. We don't do that here. That's more powerful than, the big loud principal guy yelling at somebody or something along that line. So, and, you know, every single student who walked into that building knew that I knew them deeply and intently, and that is another powerful thing. And I'll actually tell you a funny story. I had a kid, an 8th grader, who decided he was going to skip school, okay? And he, you know, so he skipped school. We figured out he skipped school. Now, in the handbook at that point in time, it said, if you skip school, you're going to be suspended at home. That made no sense to me, by the way. So I had, we'll use the word Jimmy, I had Jimmy come in. I said, Jimmy, I'm really upset. You're in 8th grade, and I just lost a day with you. He's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I said, no, Jimmy, I only have, and I actually at that point I had counted how many, I only have so many days left, and you gypped in the other day. So here's how we're gonna do this. You're gonna stay after school with me for the next 5 days for 2 hours a day to make up that time, because I don't wanna be gypped. Now, he thought I was absolutely crazy, okay? And what did I do during that time? I worked with Jimmy to make sure he caught up on every single piece of his work, made sure he understood exactly what the expectations were, okay? Leaning in, showing the love, right? You wanna know how many kids skipped school after that? 0. Okay? And it wasn't, you know, but again, that's thinking out of the box. How do we get the behaviors we want to get? And how are we really showing kids that we value them being in school and being with us? I don't think Jimmy will ever forget me. And that's okay with me. But, you know, but that's the kind of approach you're looking at, that connectiveness. Here's what we expect, here's what we want, and it's systemic and part of the culture.
You may. Thank you. That's great, and I'm very interested in that. Can you expand on that in terms of culture with regard to academic performance? So obviously that's culture about the social emotional, but can you maybe talk about middle school and getting those results in terms of grades? And
yeah, well, you know, and then, you know, well, going back to, so we started the work, and this comes from my work with DESE on visiting underperforming and exemplary schools on a panel, and the ones that were making progress were sitting down, looking at common assessments. This is the work of Dufour and Dufour, right? Common assessments, looking at the work, and the adults would come together and look at and plan for the children's success. We then put a block of time in the schedule to do that. This is before Flex Block was a big thing. And we progress monitored by hand without iReady, iExcel, STAR, whatever it was, to do that work. The teacher leaders would sit with the teachers and look at, and we would arrange the kids in different groups based on those assessments. You know, kids that were below, somewhat below, on track, and above. There were things for the kids who were exceeding as well to do to bring them up higher, and work on that. Okay, close those gaps, make sure they were making progress. So, you know, to go back with the culture piece, you're not going to have, if kids don't feel safe, learning is difficult, right? So it's there isn't one simple answer to any of this. It's very complex. And then, you know, the other thing, you know, and I'll give you, so this is, again, closing those gaps, raising, but it's not just about raising the ceiling, you also have to raise the floor. So when I got there was one advanced algebra class on one team. Like, why do we only have one? Well, I said you know, and there's basically 150, 175 kids per grade level in this school. I'm like, only 25 can do algebra? Really? We don't have 50? We can't have 75 doing algebra? So that was a constant push. And, you know, you can't get more kids doing algebra until you have 2 classes of algebra, all right? But there was an expectation for what they were going to be doing. They had to, you know, we had a placement test, if you will, and we looked at this, we looked at that, and work ethic, and then, you know, we expanded it so that we doubled the number of kids we had taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So it's all these pieces put together. Then the other piece that we did is we put in an extra math class, more to be more hands-on. But, you know, I told the kids that if you didn't do well on the MCAS, we're using that data in August to determine whether you're in the first and the third term taking it or the second and the fourth. So the kids who were at grade level were doing it 2 and 4, and the kids that were below were doing it 1 and 3. So all of those sorts of things to get it, but that I think was one of the turning points, because kids in middle school are not really thinking about grades. They're thinking about all the other things that middle school kids think about. Some you wish they wouldn't, but all those things that they think about. But when I told them that I was going to be placing them based on how they did on their MCAS, then I got better MCAS results. So, and it wasn't, everybody was doing it. It wasn't a bad, like, oh, you're bad, but it was first, and we were looking at specifically in that first term, where were the weaknesses that we saw in that kid from their MCAS. So that's the other piece, is we were really deep into the data and looking at it from, Stevie, how did Stevie do with this? Where are Stevie's weak points? And the teachers knew where those were from the test before, when they would have them in 5th grade or 6th grade or what have you, and targeting it. So it really got very personal with that and very connected, and that's what happened.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Ragsdale.
Wilmington is currently negotiating with several of our bargaining units, and expect these negotiations to continue on into the coming school year.
Yep.
Can you describe your experience working with and developing relationships with your teacher union,
Yeah.
both in terms of collective bargaining, but also grievance resolutions, and just in general
Right.
managing the relationship between the
Yeah.
district and the union?
So that is one of the key relationships you have to build on day one, is with the unions, with the union leadership. And I tell people, negotiations doesn't start when you sit at the table. Relationships have to be built before then, right? So I ask that we have open communication, that we come together as, to problem solve if there's something there. I ask that there's honest dialogue about what we need and what we want, and we might not always agree on that, but at least we're having open and honest dialogue. So again, it's that building relationship, building trust piece. When you have that, then you can do some of the other things and have the difficult conversations, because you're coming at it from a position of trust, right? So that starts on day one. I will tell you that having those kind of relationships and standing meetings with the union leadership, and I've told them straight out, if you want me to come to an executive board meeting, let me know. I will come to an executive board meeting. I will come meet you wherever you are and listen to what your concerns are and answer your questions. We might not walk out and agree with everything, but I will come and I will listen. I have negotiated 3 teacher contracts, 3 paraprofessional contracts, 2 custodial contracts, 2 secretarial contracts, at this point. So we just finished in Mashpee, and it's not ratified yet, so I can't share too much, with our paraprofessionals. I was told when we started that this did not go well the last 2 times. They ended up in mediation and it going through the summer. And I said, well, I don't understand how that could be. I think we can finish this before April vacation. We did finish it before April vacation because of that trust and because of that gratitude and authenticity that I bring to the work. And my willingness to listen to different points of view and try to understand what they are asking for and why they're asking for it. And again, it's a team of people, but we were able to finish that quickly. I've been told by the union leadership that they never felt as respected as they had in that process before. And it wasn't like, they got multi-million, 1,000% increase. It was reasonable. We were able to build a career ladder program because we need to develop something that's going to help people become teachers, because we're heading towards a shortage, if anyone hadn't noticed. So put that in there and had agreement on a whole bunch of other things that improve working conditions, as well as compensation and other things to, you know, I don't know, probably shouldn't say this, but I've had 3 paraprofessionals give me hugs and thank me for the process. So, you know, I think, you know, and no one got everything they wanted, but I think that, again, you know, respect for the work, everybody is important to what we do, from our custodian, our secretary, everybody has a role to play in this very intricate, important work that we do, and showing value and appreciation for that goes a long way. You know, the other story I'll tell you, and this again, you know, we can disagree. I don't take it personally. You know what I mean? So some people will get into a thing and you know, it becomes a personal problem. I don't understand that. You know, we're all professionals here. We got a job to do. And so I got a call from the chair in Mashpee asking how many grievances they had filed. And I told him none. And he said, "What do you mean you don't have any?" I said, "Well, when I have a question, I call the union president and say, I'm concerned about this. And when she has a problem, she brings it to me and we try to problem solve it. And we've done a pretty good job of that." And that's 3 months in, okay? So one of my superpowers is being able to connect with people and build trust. And, you know, we still have a great relationship. But part of that is also giving a little bit where, you know, we had a deadline. I can't remember what the deadline, it was for course reimbursement or moving over, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a deadline, the deadline fell on a Sunday. And I'm like, okay, this is a Sunday, no one should have to stop their Sunday to get their paperwork in electronically. So I gave them and said, you know, just so you know, because the date fell on a Sunday, we will take these applications for blah, blah, blah until Monday at 4 o'clock. That's not a big thing, that's just being kind and respectful to people and their family time. That, you know, got me a lot of coins in that jar of goodwill, you know, and doing those things where you can really help people in a constructive way goes a long way. They feel appreciated, they feel respected.
Thank you.
Sorry, I lost my place. Dr. McCauley.
Sure. Thank you. So, as you're surely aware, many school districts are struggling with their budgets and the challenge of funding their schools properly. Mm-hmm. Wilmington has so far managed to avoid some of the extremely painful measures many districts have had to use, but we still feel the pressure on our budget. Mm-hmm. Please explain, 1, the process you use to develop your budget. 2, how you present the budget in a way that will gain the support of the school committee, the finance committee, and the town. And 3, what areas do you think are the highest priorities to protect in the budget?
Okay. So I might have to ask you to repeat parts of that.
That's fine.
Because
No
it's
problem.
after 9:30.
It's a big question. It's late. Yeah.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I firmly believe in trying to do 5-year projections out. There are certain things that you can project out, mainly labor costs, as long as you have a settled contract. Maybe you can't do all of them every year, but you keep doing that and moving it forward, and being transparent about what those are, because that's 80%, 78, 80% of your budget right there. And it's not, the only way to get around that 80% is to not have the labor working. So, and that's problematic, right? So the first thing is, that consistent transparency of what we're expecting our costs to be going up. If there is a budget driver or disruptor that's coming along, you're communicating that first to the school committee, obviously, but to the selectmen, finance board, town manager, so that they know what those challenges are, what we're seeing. I think I've told the story several times about we had 4 students move in after April 1st. If it's after April 1st, you don't have to pay for those out-of-district students in that year, but you will own them the following year. They were all residential, out-of-district placements at about $250,000 apiece, so that was $1 million swing in out-of-district costs. That's a huge swing. So I found that out in May. Okay, I started sharing that information in May with people because this was going to be a problem for the next May. Okay, when it comes to building the budget, there are 2 things that that we really need to, so the budget, the strategic plan should drive the budget. Those should be the things that are your priorities. Those are the things you need to fund to move the district forward if you've done the work well, and I believe you have here, where you have community input. So everybody should know what those things are in the budget, and and aligning those budget items to the strategic plan goes a long way. Because hopefully, you've had selectmen in the room, finance committee members in the room, town manager in the room, other important people, stakeholders in the room, so that they know what that is. And then I always ask the principals to put together a budget that represents what they really feel they need. Not everything they want, what they really feel they need. All right, and that's a starting point. And I do that for, not to inflate numbers, but to really illustrate what that need is. All right, now that's not the official budget that I'm going to come forward with, because obviously there's conversations of, how much revenue is coming in and how much you can float out of that. From that, you work down to a first pass budget, present that area by 1,000. Category by 1,000 category, specifically call out those budget drivers that are moving that number. It could be labor costs, it could be a new settled contract, it could be out of district or special ed costs that are increasing, and we're seeing that across the Commonwealth, across the nation, where the special ed costs and the needs are going up. And unfortunately, there's not enough money coming in to solve that and keep the services elsewhere. When it comes to reducing, which, obviously you don't want to do, but there's a couple things you want to try to, keep your core instruction intact as much as possible, but you also need to, if you're going to reduce, you can't just do one area, because when you do just one area, like if you get rid of a subject area or virtual high school, you cause an imbalance and a problem in your entire schedule. So it's generally better to try to reduce across the board. When you look, so the other thing that you will find me doing is I will not recommend cuts until we really have a hard, firm number. I am averse to the sky is falling scenario where, everyone is talking about, oh, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that, before we really know. And this is, and I'm not sure of what your budget schedule looks like, but I've been in districts where they're asking for a budget before the House and Senate and Governor have come out with a budget, which I think is, we can put together what we're looking for, but in order to get to that end number, we need to have those numbers. And I know Chapter 70 probably isn't changing all that quickly for you folks. But, what are those numbers? Sometimes that Senate budget or that House budget comes in higher than the governor's budget, and there's a whole bunch of arm twisting and what have you. But when you get to what you're going to cut, I don't believe you should have anything on that list that you're not actually going to do. Because once you start flopping around with the sky is falling, oh no, it's not falling, then people stop trusting you. And it takes forever to get that back. So I'm a little cautious when we come to, if we come to that aspect of reductions or cutting. And I've had to, make horrible cuts, people in building. I mean, in Rainham, I was the principal. We lost dog racing, and I'm not going to debate that, but there were not dogs in Rainham being abused. And that was a major piece. It also hit at the same time as the 2008 stock market crash, or the bubble bursting. So I ended up cutting 11 teachers out of my building, out of 40. And we stopped, so we laid off, this is how, we laid off all the social studies teachers in the middle school and had everybody else teach social studies. So, yeah, very, very difficult time. But, we actually had to move all of the computers out of the classroom so we could put more chairs in there, because there are 35. So Raynham Middle School probably would have seen that improvement before then, except for that hit to the staff. So when you do things like that, you need to realize that it is going to impact your outcomes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. That brings us to Mr. Golden.
Thank you. The responsibilities of a superintendent are numerous and can pile up quickly in short periods of time. What do you do to make sure every part of your work gets the attention it deserves?
Yeah, you have to, so there's basically three buckets. There's the have to do now, there's the need to do soon, and the I better get done before the end of the year. So prioritizing what needs to get done, delegating, and working with others on the team to get things done. So that's kind of how I approach it. I do look at things from a project management sort of piece, where we will, this is these are the things, you do this, you do that, and assigning different pieces of the project to make sure it gets done. There are things that will come up that will jump on top of things, but making sure that you're starting on things early enough to make sure that that's not going to disrupt everything. And it's, it's not always perfect, but that's kind of how I approach it. Need to use and maximize your executive assistant to help organize and filter some of that stuff. And realizing, what are the things that only the superintendent can do and what are the things that other people can do. And being able to assign those and differentiate those. And, and it's not, he doesn't want to do the work, he's making somebody else doing the work. That actually can be an opportunity for some growth in people and chances to coach people up and have them grow so that they can move to the next level. So, as a young assistant principal, I worked for an incredible superintendent that gave me district-wide things that I was responsible for. Look what happened. No, just kidding. But gave me things to be responsible for as a growth opportunity. And these sorts of things and that project management piece gives that opportunity to others.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Can you please tell us about how you work alongside your school committees? Please include examples of your communication practices and your success and lessons learned from past experiences.
Yeah, so, an effective superintendent school committee relationship is a collaborative relationship, and there are different roles, but there are places where they overlap. Communication has got to be clear, it's got to be consistent, it's got to be respectful. I look at the school committee as the tendrils, if you will, out into the community. You might hear things before I do. If I know something's happening, I'm going to let you know. My running joke is I'm going to do my best to make sure that you are not blindsided in the grocery store, on the soccer field, or what have you, with something that has gone on. Generally communicate, and I'm not quite sure what the practice is, but generally on the off weeks, we'll share a short communication if there's something important. If it's boring, I'll say, hey, had a boring week this week. It's off. I'm just kidding. That never happens. But but those off weeks when you don't have a school committee meeting, little update. If there's something that is going to make the news show up, then I'm going to do my best to make sure you know about it. I would ask the same from you. So if you're somewhere and you hear something that let me know. More often than not, that's something that I didn't know, and sometimes principals don't know. I ask that my principals let me know if there's something problematic coming up so that I can determine whether we need to make an announcement. So, and again, communication style in general, if there is some sort of crisis thing, that first hour or so, getting out in front is really important. Being empathetic, being transparent, and being honest about what is going on and what you're going to be doing about it before a story spirals. Can you read that one more time? I think I'm missing something.
Examples of your communication practices and successes and lessons learned from your
lesson learned. Yeah. I've been pretty good with that. There have been there have been situations where because of the situation, it has gotten ahead of things. And, I'll think of one we had, you have threats and you have threat assessments, and we have protocols that are well-established, and we use the same threat protocol from Secret Service and the FBI for 3 years. The difference with this one was that we discovered it as everybody was coming to the middle school. Perfect timing, right? So no one was there and didn't have a full picture of this threat or how far it had gone. Realized afterwards that it had gone, someone had, taken the screenshot and sent it around the night before, and it caused a big problem. So, and then show up, talking with, with the police. They felt that they could captured this person who had done this because of various other things I'm not allowed to talk about. So they didn't want us to message too much, which was actually kind of a long-term mistake with that, because it did not get out in front of it. It started to spin, and we had hundreds of parents showing up to dismiss their kids for something that we weren't even doing a lockdown for. The other thing that I realized from that is that parents don't always understand the different verbiage that we use. And again, anytime you have something like that, you'd like to be perfect 100% of the time. My wife reminds me that that's not the case. But I always do an incident review of that. So we sat with the police and fire. We sat as an administrative team. We sat with the police and fire, went through it. And every parent that was concerned, I met with every single parent who was concerned. I had about 15 of them who contacted me, called or emailed or whatever, and I responded to every single one of them. There was not an immediate threat or danger. There's a process that we go through to ensure that it's not the case. But learn from that, change some of our protocols so that we could quickly get ahead with messaging on things. Had a conversation with the police about we need to have something better than don't worry about it. And then kind of went from there. So sometimes you have to take your lumps, but not too often. Yep.
Dr. Bryson?
That's me. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of administrators and teachers? How do you retain and attract effective administrators and teachers? And how do you address their areas of growth?
Yeah, so the best way to do that is to work through your building leadership. So what I do as part of my evaluation is I will go and do joint observations with the principals of teachers, and just do the walkthroughs, and I'm actually coaching them on what I see compared to what they see and what kind of feedback they're going to give to their teachers. That's a fundamental piece, because the principal, the vice principal in the building is the key person that's going to cause the growth of the teachers in that building. Okay, so me being in there, once a week, once every other week is not enough time, and the relationships are not as strong as that building principal. So I need to build strong building leadership to do that work with the principals. I stress constructive feedback, building trust, ensuring people feel safe enough to take risks and to stretch and try to grow. I do not believe in a got you sort of scenario. It should be constructive, it should be feedback, and it should be focused on students, how they're learning, what we're seeing in the classroom, and getting the best student outcomes. That coaching leaders and coaching administrators is something that I'm very proud of. It's something that I enjoy. I was a supervisor for the State Principals Association's licensure program, and I have coached up to people who became middle school and high school principal of the year here in Massachusetts. So I used the same model I've used with those folks. The other thing is that it's not just the observation piece, it's trying to grow them in other ways. So if they have challenges or whatever, it's an open communication with them, and I'm a thought partner and a coach. And that's how I approach it, and that's how I ask my building leaders to approach teacher evaluation and teacher feedback, is as a coach. Everybody has areas they can get better at things.
Mr. Ragsdale, a follow-up?
Can you talk a little bit about how you, the process you use for hiring, how to get the right person, the strongest administrators into those positions in the first place?
Yeah, so, well, this is gonna sound conceited, but I have kind of a reputation, so it's a good one. But I have a reputation, just want to be clear.
Me too.
I have a reputation, and people will actually come to places because of how I run my team and such. And, you know, I had people calling me asking if I was staying in Mashpee. I said, no, I'm not going to be staying in Mashpee, and they didn't apply. But there's things that I look for in people. You know, first is, you know, a love of kids, and you would think, oh, well, everybody loves kids if they're in education. Some more than others, okay? A love of kids, a growth mindset, okay? They want to learn, they want to improve, and they're a team player. Okay, so those are kind of the three characteristics I look for. Obviously, they have to have the right certification and the right kind of education, those other sort of things, but there's certain things that you can teach people, and there's certain things that are core characteristics that are difficult to change. Okay, so that's kind of what I look for. You know, we've had pretty good luck with you know, the general, you know, school spring, power school sort of thing. But I also have gone out to local colleges and done recruiting and been there to, you know, with our open positions to try to find people. The other thing that, you know, and I already talked about the career ladder piece, I think we need to move to a place where we're trying to develop our own folks in-house. And then there's another one that just escaped me. Yeah, and then, you know, the other piece is people in district that are showing potential to maybe become administrators, you know, saying, hey, have you ever thought of going to the dark side and joining me, Darth Vader, in this? You know, but, you know, have you ever thought of this? And sometimes they have not. And, you know, helping them do that. There's a guy principal in my Blue Ribbon School principal in Norwood, and it's, you know, and said, Brian, you have all the characteristics that would make you an incredible superintendent. I think you need to do X, Y, and then supporting him in pursuing his doctorate and getting experience and whatever. So that's the other piece you need to do, maybe not at the teacher level, but at the administrator level, encouraging people to think about it, giving them some opportunities. The other piece, you know, teacher leadership is important. How are we developing teacher leadership? How are we giving teachers the opportunity to be in positions of leadership? And that was, you know, one of the secrets of Raina Middle School is that I had people in each subject area who were leading those discussions about student results and how to improve results for kids. So it got to a point. So originally I was doing all of it, and then, you know, trained them up on how to do it, and then stepped back and, you know, was the cheerleader with the pom-poms.
Thank you. So I had the pleasure of the first question, and I also get the last question, but I will stop for just a brief second and thank you for your time. I know it's been an incredibly long day. You get to meet the building leaders, the central office team, you get to spend some time with us, so thank you for your time. But as a final question, what questions do you have for us?
Yeah, so a couple, and I asked a couple earlier, so I won't continue to ask the same questions. What were the big budget drivers for this budget for FY26? What were the things that were causing consternation? So, and again, this is part of kind of getting to know where the rough spots in the road are. So,
sure, Mr. Turner.
So the two of the biggest ones were, as in many districts, special education out-of-district tuitions, special education transportation.
Right.
Were two of our primary drivers this time through.
Okay.
There were others for sure, but those.
Yeah, but those are the two biggies.
Yeah, we'll say those. He's right there. Am I forgetting something, Paul?
I'm not sure we can phone a
Oh,
friend.
yeah, we can't phone a friend.
In this particular
But
venue.
those were the two biggest drivers, and they've been
Yeah.
consistent for particularly the last
Yeah.
two years. There was a very large jump in special education out of district tuitions 2 years ago,
Right.
particularly large, and the transportation jump was particularly large this year.
Yeah.
But those two things are interlocked. And as a district, we've worked very hard over a decade.
Right.
To work and do all we can to have students in district as much as possible for all the benefits of, the community learning, the community environment. But there's still some students that need to be serviced out of district, and that is certainly a significant driver. We did also renegotiate our bus contract a year ago. It was the first time after 5-year, put that over there, 5-year contract, and so there was a big jump in that.
Yeah.
2 years ago. That wasn't this year because we're now in the second year of that contract. So those types of drivers.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. And obviously, as in every district, 85% of our costs are staffing.
Right.
It is, as somebody famous says, we're a people business.
Yeah.
So.
All right, thank you. My other question is kind of an update. We're going into a town meeting vote, and we're going for the building, and we're going into a ballot vote in the fall. So my question is, are there groups that are, promoting one or the other? What kind of public outreach or sharing of information has occurred up to this point in time?
I don't know that there's a formal no group,
Okay.
but there is a formal yes group.
Yeah, so myself, Mr. Turner, Mr. Ragsdale serve on the school building committee.
Yep.
That has a PR subgroup, which is dedicated to spreading information, pro and con, just all the information that
Right.
folks are going to need.
Right.
There is an organized yes vote committee.
Okay.
There is, as the chair said, not to our knowledge, an organized no campaign.
Right.
But obviously, these are delicate things,
Yep.
these votes. No one's going to know what's going to happen until the end of the road there.
Right.
But there's a degree of momentum and a degree of optimism. But
Okay.
we're going to see what happens.
Good, all right.
I'd say there's certainly a vocal minority active on social media, but to Mr. Golden's point, I don't know that there's necessarily an organized
Right.
campaign like there is for the yes vote.
Have we done tours of the buildings that are going to be replaced?
We could certainly do more. I don't think there have been public tours. I think that's a very, very good, very important idea, because if there's a messaging gap right now, it is the need. As much as we talk about it, we know it intimately day in, day out.
Right.
I do think that if we were to have tours for the public, that would be a game changer for the messaging on this topic.
Yeah. The other thing to look at is, I know we have cable here, but have someone walk through and put it on cable.
Mr. Turner, I think we did, yeah?
So what was done already was the school building committee is made up of a wide representation of town, including a couple select board members, the three of us, members from the administration, teachers, parents, the select board town manager, head of buildings. That group has done the tours.
Okay.
And that group also did tours of other modern, recent construction. And so they've
Right.
seen that piece of it. And when we did a recent project in town, there were videos done then of
Right.
existing buildings. So one option is certainly to do some videos. Another option is to do open houses.
Yeah.
It's certainly revealing and eye-opening when you see them in person, up close, some of the buildings.
That is something that we did in Norwood, was open. I think we had 6 different, and we did a Saturday, we did an evening, we did an afternoon. When there weren't kids in the school, obviously, but that was, because, if you haven't had a kid in the school recently, you might not see those things, and that really was one of what was a game changer. So I was curious where we were with that. All right, so those are my 2 questions.
Thank you.
All right, you don't have any more questions?
We don't have any more questions.
Was there anything that I didn't hit with? Because some of these were 3 or 4 spots, and get a little paranoid that I might have missed.
No, I don't think so.
No.
We're not shy about follow-up
pretty good
questions.
about
Well, I didn't think you were shy, but I didn't want to miss. I didn't want to,
So,
short circuit the opportunity either. So.
We could keep you here till 1 in the morning, but I
Well,
think for all of our benefit.
I took my little 5-hour
There
energy
we
thing,
go.
so I'm good for another 2 hours, so I'm good.
I think considering the time and
Yeah.
that we need to be fair and ask the same questions of all of the
Yep.
candidates, this is a good place. So to not hold you up, Dr. Thompson,
Yeah.
somebody make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Somebody second it.
Second.
So Nick and then Mike.
Hold on, yeah.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
night.
much.
Thank you so
Really
much.
appreciate spending the day with you.